Meanwhile, Chief Lupin and the rest of the brown-blood werewolves finally returned to their base camp, with people and beastfolk still celebrating the end of their tournament. Chief Lupin slumped back down on his fur-ladened bed and took a deep sigh. It wasn't easy seeing his older brother again after so many years. It hurt him seeing how much anger and resentment he still had because of that incident. In truth, he wanted to reconcile with him. It would be good for both of their tribes to finally become one again and rise up the ranks of the tribes within the werewolf community. However, even he knew that his betrayal couldn't be easily forgiven nor forgotten. Of course, he had his own reasons for doing what he had to do, but Klaus treated it as nothing less than a betrayal worthy of death. If he weren't his blood brother, then Klaus would have already started a war against him. And now, he had to worry about the upcoming lunar celebrations. The lunar celebrations was an annual event that involved all of the werewolf tribes in festivities, socialization, worship, and most important of all, competition. That was the reason why he started the swordsman competition in the first place. He wanted to have a competent swordsman within his midst so that he wouldn't embarrass himself and his tribe in the lunar celebrations. And he thought he finally had the perfect ally in the Auberts. He thought that this would be the chance for the Brownbloods to take center stage and cast away the reputation they had for being one of the weakest. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Mauricio lost, in convincing fashion no less. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was just a formality for the Auberts. Now, Chief Lupin was at a crossroads. He had a choice. Continue to ally with the Auberts or choose someone else instead. By all accounts, he should pick the latter. Choosing the winner would definitely give him a mighty swordsman as an ally, giving him a large chance to win in the lunar celebrations. But that was it. If he sided with the Aubert company, not only would he get a talented swordsman in Mauricio, but he would also gain the help of the entire Aubert clan. The resources that they could give him were crucial to their growth. Sergio even mentioned that they could give him a steady supply of moonstone. For him, this was the obvious choice. But of course, he had to consult his tribe first. So, he gathered the rest of his advisors in the room and asked for their opinion. Chief, we highly advise you to seek the winner of the tournament. We should ally with him instead. Chief Lupin raised an eyebrow. He thought they'd agree with him. But that is just one person. The Auberts can give us a whole lot more. Not a person, Chief. It was a demi-human, corrected one of his advisors. Chief Lupin paused for a second, confusion written all over his face. What do you mean, a demi-human? How is that even possible? The rest of his attendants looked at each other awkwardly. We intended to break the news to you earlier, Chief, but you were busy with your meeting with the other beastfolk leaders. There's something you should know. An explanation later, a resounding shout suddenly echoed through the Brownblood tribe. What? Chief Lupin almost transformed into his wolf form due to pure shock. Large gray hairs were already forming out of his arm. A demi-human was able to manifest a diva? Impossible. However, the rest of his attendants attested to the news. It's true, Chief. Hundreds of brown-blood werewolves saw it themselves. It was unmistakable. It was the same strange figure that appears above those human magnetics. Chief Lupin took a second to compose himself before saying, Tell me everything that happened. Eventually, a whimper echoed from the door as a female werewolf entered after asking for permission. Come in, Chief Lupin said. It was one of the female werewolf judges who were in charge of the competition. He had specifically asked for her because she seemed to be the one most familiar with this underdog winner who defeated Mauricio. Was it true? He asked. The female werewolf nodded before going into the specific details of the tournament. She first told him about the first test, about how she impulsively turned on the straw dummy to its werewolf form, making the test harder than it should have been. This already showed talent from the demi-human, but it wasn't enough to defeat someone like Mauricio. Then, she told him about his other battles in which he showed nothing but laziness in each one, doing nothing but sleeping while his opponents trained. Yet at the very end, when all hope seemed lost, a great new power emerged from the demi-human that allowed him to triumph against Mauricio. Chief Lupin listened to the story intently, his eyes widening at the part where Jaku officially became a magnetic. Unbelievable, he muttered to himself. How can a demi-human achieve this? Then, Chief Lupin remembered something. Wait, he was supposed to defeat 3 other swordsmen to win the tournament. How could he have done that? From the story that they told him, it seemed as if the odds were completely stacked against Jaku. If even one of his opponents escaped, then he would technically lose on time. Something weird happened, Chief Lupin, said the female werewolf. They suddenly lost the ability to escape. What? The other attendants nodded in confirmation. We saw it as well, Chief. The 3 other swordsmen were on the brink of escape, but suddenly tumbled forwards helplessly. We think they failed to activate their ability power because their diva disappeared for a moment. Chief Lupin's brows were squished together as he tried to make sense of what happened. There were 2 possibilities. One was that the 3 swordsmen deliberately made themselves lose, or their ability powers got disrupted. Chief Lupin muttered to himself. Suddenly, a thought appeared in his head. 2 words. Ancient roar. But just as quickly as it appeared, Chief Lupin erased the thought from his head. He had been speaking and talking about the ancient roar too much that his thoughts were getting influenced by it. There was no way that a demi-human would awaken the ancient roar out of nowhere. It was impossible. However, it was still incredibly impressive that a demi-human was able to awaken a diva. Just from that alone, Chief Lupin knew that it would be worth it to ally themselves with him. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, he said to the female werewolf, dismissing her. She opened her mouth, about to say something, but quickly turned around to leave the room. But just as she was about to open the door, she turned back. Chief, there was just one weird thing that happened. What was it? When those 3 swordsmen lost their power, I also felt something in my chest. It felt like someone was pressing on my Dao heart, she confessed. Chief Lupin's eyes narrowed. Was it just you who felt it? Me as well, Chief. I felt it, said one of his attendants. I noticed it too, but dismissed it as nothing but a strange coincidence. It wasn't just that, but I felt the ground shaking as it happened. Chief Lupin's eyes widened. A strange pressure on the Dao heart. A quaking sensation that could be felt from the earth. A strange power that could disable other powers. When put it all together, Chief Lupin couldn't help but think back to his first thought. Could it be? Was it him? Chief Lupin suddenly stood up, his eyes fixated on the door. I have to talk to him now. What was his name? We have to get him on our side, he exploded. He was already halfway through the door when his attendants broke the bad news. He already left, Chief. Awoo. Filled with great emotions, Chief Lupin couldn't help but let the inner wolf within him burst out into the scene. The whole of the brown blood tribe watched as their leader turned into the giant brown wolf that towered over every single one of them. Where is he? Chief Lupin growled. Some of the werewolves were intimidated by their chief's voice. Although he didn't mean to scare them, he just couldn't help but express his disappointment with the situation by releasing all the pent-up emotions he had. After all, if his guess was correct, then that demi-human may be the secret that they'd been trying to find all this time. And now he was gone. One could only imagine how Chief Lupin was feeling right now. Why did he leave? He asked his attendants. The demi-human won the tournament. He was supposed to stay behind and reach an allyship agreement with them. That was the entire purpose of the tournament to begin with. Yet he left without another word. It didn't make sense. If he didn't want to ally with them, then why did he even enter into the tournament in the first place? Meanwhile, the female werewolf stood idly in the corner. She stayed quiet, but she knew the reason why Jaku left. He'd been saying it since the beginning of the tournament. He just wanted to sleep. However, the chief probably won't like that explanation. We must find him, Chief Lupin commanded the entire tribe. Do anything you can to bring him to our side, as if our lives depend on it. On a far-off corner of the world, space began to twist into a single point, before eventually completely tearing, with its inside leading to a completely different dimension. A second after its appearance, a woman stepped out of the spatial rift carrying someone in her arms. It was the white-haired woman Michael met, and with her was the unconscious body of the professor. She walked forwards, her feet hovering an inch from the floor, only stopping as she reached a large table in the middle of the room. It was dark inside, but the light from the table just barely illuminated a few figures that were sitting around the chairs in the table. In the middle of the table was a magical projection of a topographical map of the entire world. It contained all the continents that housed the different species of life from humans, to demi-humans, and to beast folks. And curiously enough, some parts of the world were lit up with a green light, while others were lit up with a bright red. But if one were to look at the royal continent, then one would see that it was one of the few places where it was gray in color. It wasn't green nor red. And on the ceiling, right on top of the table and giving it the little bit of light it had, was a sun with 8 different and distinct rays representing the 8 mana elements. The whole table was wrapped in discussion, with each person pointing at a specific map and giving their opinions about its current situation. They've expanded their territory here. We tried to fight back, but unfortunately, they were able to take full control of it. It's a setback, but one that we can remedy. Let us send a few troops on the border so that we can prevent their further expansion. Can we afford it? We all know that things are happening in the royal continent and we can't. But suddenly, all discussions stopped as footsteps echoed throughout the room. As soon as the white woman showed herself, all attention was placed on her. Katerina. What happened to the professor? The vague figure of a person stood up from the table as they saw the unconscious body of the professor. Everyone was alerted at the sight and looked at Katerina for an explanation. His failsafe activated, Katerina answered. As soon as she said that, murmurs erupted around the room. It wasn't just the figures who were sitting at the table. It was also other people who were in the room, surrounded by darkness. His failsafe. Bring him to the infirmary. It wasn't long before 4 people wearing a white robe approached Katerina and took the professor's body. While 2 carried the stretcher, the other 2 began examining the professor's state. It's good that you were able to secure him, the vague voice said. If his failsafe activated, then that means he stumbled upon a great truth. What did he find out? Everyone in this room knew what this failsafe meant. It was a way for the professor to ensure that he could process an enormous amount of information without his brain exploding from pure overload. It may sound dangerous, but it was actually a good thing. The fact that the professor had to activate his failsafe meant that he was close to having a breakthrough. He was close to uncovering a mystery of the world. That was what the failsafe truly meant. Once he was out of this comatose state, then this meant that he had properly digested the information that he received and made a conclusion about its meaning. A breakthrough of this caliber could help them with the current war they were facing. However, there was still a risk to this failsafe. If he wasn't able to succeed in processing this information, then his brain would burn out and lead him to become permanently brain dead. Katerina looked back at the fading figure of her father as the people in white coats led him into another room. How can I help my father? Katerina asked, almost pleading. There is nothing to do but wait. This all depends on your father, whether he achieves a breakthrough or not. The vague voice answered, but there is a way. Katerina's eyes widened with hope. If we find out what information the professor stumbled upon during his travels, then we can use that information and process it ourselves. It'll lessen the load on Liechtenstein and increase the chance for his breakthrough. Helping the professor was an important task in their entire organization. Unfortunately, there was a reason why the professor was so vital to their team. It was because he was the only one with such a specialized form of knowledge that could understand the intricacies of the ancient era. Even if they stumbled onto what the professor found out, it was highly unlikely they could reach the same thought as he had that led to his activation of the failsafe. But we will try, said the vague voice. Thankfully, they had already had a lead on important information. After all, they all knew the reason why the professor even went to New Sparta in the first place. Of course, it was the antique. That must be the reason why the professor activated his failsafe. What else could it have been? It seems we underestimated the professor. I didn't think he'd be able to convince Zoviru to give him the antique. But you know the professor. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Shall we start probing for the antique? The person sitting at the very center of the table nodded. We already have a few of our operatives in New Sparta for defense, but we can spare a few of them for the antique investigation. A wise decision. As the members of the table began making decisions, there was just one person completely left out of the conversation. Katerina held on to her father's body. I'll go back to New Sparta and help with the investigation, she said. But the others from the table clearly didn't like that. Katerina, your efforts will be more appreciated in the front lines. You know how much we are in great need of strong warriors. Without you, there will be more unnecessary casualties on the battleground. Katerina's attention was pulled towards the map in the table. As of right now, there were multiple territories on there which had two conflicting colors clashing against each other. On one side was the color green, representing the territory that their organization had full control over, while the other side was colored red, for the territories that their enemy had captured. Even now, the map was ever-changing. There were regions where it was a constant push and pull against the other side, capturing more territories but losing them just a day later. With Katerina's nascent spirit cultivation, she could single-handedly push some boundaries and expand their territory much further than it already was, saving lives in the process. Usually, Katerina wouldn't hesitate to throw herself into the battlefield. But now, her focus was completely on her father. Even though he was crazy, even though he was absent for most of her life, he was still her father. And she would do anything she can to help him survive this. I need to go to New Sparta, she insisted. We have it all covered on that front, replied the vague voice. But we will convene with you once we have the antique on our hands. Katerina shook her head. I think you're wrong. Excuse me? You're focusing on the wrong thing. I do not think that it was the antique that caused the failsafe on my father, she said confidently. The rest of the figures on the table were silent for a second, but it was clear they disagreed based on the looks on their faces. There is no other explanation. What else could it be? The antique is the only piece of relic that has enough impact in the world to cause such an intense reaction from the professor. Are you telling me that there could be something else that's the same in New Sparta? Katerina pursed her lips. Of course, she wasn't sure. It was just a hunch based on her instincts. I didn't see the antique. It wasn't with him, she said. If it was really the antique that caused his failsafe, then it should have been with him when he fell unconscious. He should have been in the middle of studying it, trying to decipher it, before he stumbled upon an answer that was too much for his mortal brain to comprehend. But it wasn't there. So, the only logical answer must be that it was something else that caused it. Once she reasoned this with the other members of the table, they began to finally understand her thoughts. That is a possibility, but do you really need to investigate it yourself? Can't you leave it for others? But Katerina was adamant. I need to do this. No one else can. Eventually, a sigh echoed in the room as the figure sitting in the center of the table finally agreed. Fine. We all know we can do nothing to stop you. Katerina nodded to herself, her eyes determined. I already have a course of action, she said. The other members were surprised. You have a lead already? She nodded. Before I left New Sparta, I did a little bit of digging into what my father has been doing for the last few days, and I found something interesting. He seemed to have picked up a protégé of his own. Upon saying those words, a few chuckles emanated out of the room. Even the figures in the table couldn't help but express their doubts upon hearing it. A protégé? Forgive my language, but that crazy old man having a protégé. The thought sounded absurd to anyone who knew Professor Lichtenstein for even a little bit. The man was obsessed with finding out the truth about the mysteries of the world. He cared about nothing else. In fact, even his own daughter would attest to that given how much he missed her childhood due to his little escapades. As for students, the professor had none even after all these years. His criteria was too strict. He considered anyone who was even just a slight bit of lesser intelligence than he was to be an idiot. The organization had tried multiple times to have someone become the professor's protégé, each one having incredible intelligence and interest in history. Yet he still rejected all of them. He said that he would rather do everything by himself, which was what led him to make the extremely rash decision of putting a Godforge piece in his brain. You must have heard wrong, Katerina. The professor would never take on a student. You of all people know that. Katerina subtly bit her lips. I checked it myself. There were numerous testimonies of the professor walking with someone he introduced to be his protégé. Everyone went wide-eyed. He introduced them himself? I wouldn't have believed it otherwise, Katerina answered. His name is Kyo, and sources say that he is a child about 13 years old with golden blonde hair. People began to check their own databases for a boy named Kyo with the same exact description as Katerina said. Unfortunately, they came up with nothing. Does he even exist? The vague figure asked her. Katerina nodded, her mind reeling back to the time she met him. Yes, I've seen him myself, she said. I will go back to New Sparta and investigate him. He was with the professor during his failsafe. Only he knows what happened. When she first met him, she didn't think he was anything special. She just thought that he happened to come across the professor by accident. But then, she found out that he was Kyo, the professor's protégé. And suddenly, everything made sense. She knew that there was something different about him. She still couldn't explain that move of his, how he was able to move just as fast as her despite being only in the body formation realm. It was clear to her that Kyo had secrets of his own. And perhaps that was the reason why the professor took him in as his protégé in the first place. So she decided to seek him out. She was going to interact with him and see if he could tell her anything about what caused the professor's failsafe. Michael and Jaku returned to the nation of Reborn, having gone through an extraordinarily packed few days in New Sparta. But thankfully, though, it seemed that he came in right on time as Castell burst into his office in the morning with a wide grin on her face. Good morning, young master, Castell greeted, bowing with her maid uniform on. Ugh, Castell, I told you that you don't need to give me daily updates on the Reborn company. I'm confident that you can deal with it on your own, Michael said, groaning with his head under his pillow. Castell flashed a smile. All right, young master. Then, I shall keep the $100 income report to myself then. Suddenly, Michael burst out of his bed, his eyes wide open. I'm awake. A month had already passed since the previous collection, meaning that he was about to get another burst of $100 for him to spend. This was very important because Jaku just had his awakening, meaning that he would have to give him a mini drone of his own to use in his katana. He was actually having trouble with it yesterday, but now he was glad that it was going to be solved by a simple visit from Castell. Tell me, how much did we earn from the roller coasters? Castell brought out her clipboard containing numerous pages of records that detailed the theme park's expenses, sales, and all those other important stuff. She flipped over onto the last page, showing a very simple graph that trended upwards. Last month, we earned $30,000, Lord Michael. But this month, we earned $60,000. Michael's eyes widened. That was a 2 times increase. It had only been a few months since the Merman theme park started, yet it had already accumulated such a big income. Most of the mermen that come to visit the theme park also spend most of their time in the nation of Reborn, further increasing the amount of $100 that they spend on a daily basis, she explained. The roller coaster basically lured people in the nation of Reborn. And once they were hooked, they were more likely to consume the different products and services that the rest of the nation offered. But look at this, young master, Castell said, flipping to a different page. This time it was a different graph that had a lower increase than the one she showed before. Despite the huge increase in sales, the number of visitors we have has not increased all that much. It has basically stagnated. That's not ideal, Michael muttered. All of the mermen that had visited the theme park were all the people that Reed invited thanks to his wide connections within the merman community. But of course, there were plenty of other mermen that didn't even know the roller coaster existed. They probably had never even heard of the Reborn company before. Case in point, Princess Octavia and the thousands upon thousands of mermen in their lake territory had no idea about them at all. This was an untapped market that he had yet to break into. Unfortunately, he had not yet figured out a way to fix that. Yes, young master, this is not ideal. But we have to look at the bright side. If we somehow advertise the roller coaster to a much wider market, then our sales would skyrocket even more than it is now. Not only that, but if we also increase the amount of rides we have in the roller coaster, it's just going to keep on adding an increase in our $100 revenue. She was right. And it wasn't just the mermen, it was the other beast folk races as well. If he could get their attention, he'd be swimming in $100. Thanks, Castell. You've made my day, he said to her. Now give me the bag. She then handed over a cloth bag containing $60,000 for him to use. This is 6 drops of sue, or 6 kilograms of Godforge pieces, he thought, weighing the bag in his hands. Of course, his priority right now was to strengthen the Dragonborns. He still owed Jakku a mini-drone so that his katana could officially become a mithril artifact worthy for a magnetic. He walked over to Jakku's room in their headquarters, needing to knock multiple times before the door suddenly opened. For a brief moment, he saw lightning flash behind the door, followed by a thunderous crack. Michael walked inside, only to see Jakku still sleeping in his bed. He could feel the remnants of ability power in the air. He shook his head. Most magnetics use their powers for fighting justice and defeating evil. But you're using it to open the door and still continue sleeping. Jakku replied by snoring. Fine, he sighed. I'll be back. He gave Jakku a little bit more time to sleep while he teleported to Serena and converted some of his $100 to sue drops. Once he was in the merman territory in the nation of Reborn, he immediately sought out Serena. But when he tried to look for her, she seemed to be nowhere in sight. Where is she? He asked one of her attendants. She said she was going to follow you into New Sparta. Didn't you meet up with her, Master Michael? He shook his head. He was far too busy dealing with the antique and pretending to be Kyo, the professor's assistant, that he completely forgot about his plans with Serena. They were supposed to go together and talk with the merman in the lake. Has she met Princess Octavia? He wondered. They were sisters, after all, though he didn't know if they were in the same clique. I guess I'll have to go there and see. He thanked the attendant before using his shadow teleportation skill to reach New Sparta. He didn't directly transfer himself to Princess Octavia's sunken ship lair. It would be highly suspicious of him to suddenly appear there without anyone knowing. After all, everyone there knew him as Kyo, the professor's assistant, not as Michael, the magic genius. And for now, he would like to keep that identity. He realized that there were a lot of doors that would be opened for him once they realized that he was the professor's protege. In fact, he wouldn't have even met with important people like the 2 werewolf chiefs, the draconian Zoviru, and even Princess Octavia himself. There was something disarming about his identity as only a historian. They weren't wary of him. So, once he was in New Sparta, he immediately made his way towards the edge of the lake. He was hoping that one of the mermen would recognize him and inform Princess Octavia of his presence. He walked up to the water, his feet once again unable to submerge under. Then he waited, thankfully, as he looked down at the vague bioluminescent lights that made up the underwater territory of the mermen. He suddenly saw a few figures quickly rising up to the surface. He recognized them to be a mixture of mermen and mermaids. However, there was someone there that was different. They were human. Not only that, but the white hair that flowed freely on her back evoked a very recent memory in his mind. Michael couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes as he recognized the woman surfacing up with the mermen and mermaids from under the lake. Those piercing blue eyes, sharp nose, and an air of mystery around them. There was no mistaking it. This was the very same woman from the day before. She was the one who retrieved the professor and claimed to be his daughter. A gentle splash disturbed the water as the group finally surfaced and landed on the grassy shores of the lake. Princess Octavia apologizes for not being able to help you with your problem, said one of the mermen, bowing to the woman. It's all right. I appreciate all the help she has given me, she replied. And it was at that moment that they all finally realized that they weren't the only ones there. They turned around and saw a blonde-haired kid, about 13 years old, looking at them with curious, if not shocked eyes. Recognition flashed across the mermen and mermaids' faces as they stared at Michael. They remembered him from his visit the other day. Ah, what a coincidence, said one of the mermen. Lady Katerina, this is precisely who we were speaking about before. He was the one who accompanied the professor during his visit to our little underwater city. Katerina turned towards Michael, eyebrows raised. She was clearly surprised to see him, but not an unwelcome one. Just as she said to the members of the organization, she was going to investigate everything that her father did during his visit to New Sparta. And of course, this included his brief meeting with Princess Octavia. She retraced his steps, speaking to the same people that her father spoke to, in the hopes that she could get some clues about this mysterious protege called Kyo. And it seemed that the goddess of luck answered her prayers as the person himself coincidentally appeared on the lake just as she was about to leave. Kyo, this is Katerina, said one of the mermen, introducing the two. She is one of the professor's colleagues in one of the schools he was teaching in. She was just trying to find you. Michael raised his eyebrows. Teaching? The professor? I don't remember him doing that, he said. Despite his title, Professor Lichtenstein wasn't the type of person to teach in a school or university. Anyone would know that. I don't seem to recall him having a protege either, she replied, matching his gaze. Eventually, she gave out her hand to him. Hello? My name is Katerina Petrovich, and I believe this is the first time that we have met, she said, introducing herself. Michael looked at her and finally remembered. She was in a disguise when she appeared that night. That was why she was going through with this ruse. She used her cultivation as a nascent spirit magnetic to change her face to become unrecognizable to her true one. So, she thought that Michael hadn't recognized her and that, in his perspective, this was the first time they had met. But thanks to his drone vision, he saw right through her disguise. He knew her true face, and it was exactly the face he was looking at now. Michael slowly held out his hand and replied, Kyo, nice to meet you. If she wasn't going to tell him her true identity, then neither would he. Perhaps he could get a gleam on her true motives if he kept up this facade as the professor's protege. Kyo, Katerina here was just asking Princess Octavia about what happened with you and the professor after you left the lake, said one of the mermen. Yes, it is important for our research as a whole, she added. Do you know what happened with the antique? Michael squinted at her. Shouldn't you ask the professor that yourself? Aren't you colleagues, as you say? Katerina nodded, not flustered by the question. Yes, but the professor is currently away on a project that involves him traveling halfway across the world. He never told me anything about that, Michael said innocently. That's just how the professor goes, Katerina shrugged. He is impulsive and will often leave without a moment's notice, much to the chagrin of everyone in his life. Michael noticed that when she said that, there was real emotion on her face. She seemed genuinely disappointed and hurt that the professor was the way that he was. Maybe she wasn't lying about her being his daughter. Why were you asking around? He asked her. What do you want to gain? The antique, she answered plainly. It has come to my attention that the antique wasn't in the professor's possession before he left. I would like to know where it is and who has it. Do you know who? I know where it is, he said, pausing. But why should I tell you? The antique was with Zoviru, and after winning the bet against Sergio, this meant that the antique should become the professor's possession. But with him gone, Michael now had the opportunity to get it for himself. And since he still didn't know if he should treat Katerina, if that was even her real name, as his friend or foe. It's a matter of great importance, she said gravely. Our school will use the information we gathered from the antique to educate some students that need some correction. It is not an exaggeration to say that there are lives at stake here. Michael raised his eyebrows. He could read between the lines. This school she was talking about was probably the secret organization that she and the professor were a part of. So they need the antique to teach some misguided people? He was very curious about what kind of group would have a sun with 8 distinct rays as its emblem. And perhaps, if he could slowly gain Katerina's trust, then he could figure out what kind of secret organization they were in, as well as their goals. All right, I'll tell you, but on one condition. She stayed silent, waiting for his next words. I want to study the antique first. I want to get my hands on it, he said. Katerina considered it for a second before giving her approval. "All right," she said. "That can be arranged." From her perspective, it was harmless. But of course, Michael hoped for something more. He knew that by touching the antique, ChatJK5 could analyze the information written on it and possibly decipher it into something that he could understand. The bone is with Zoviru for safekeeping, but it's already decided that it is officially the professor's possession. Katerina nodded. "Then shall we depart? It is best if we get there as soon as possible." Michael agreed. "Princess Octavia wishes you luck on your journey," said one of the mermaid attendants on the group. "Unfortunately, she is too busy speaking with one of her sisters as of this moment. If not, she would have liked to join you in your mission." "Sister? That must be Serena," he guessed. "Sorry, Serena, but I have to deal with the antique first before I meet with you." He would also be delaying Jaka's mini drone attachment for his katana, but he was pretty sure that Jaku wouldn't even care. The Dragonborn would actually be happy since he'd get to stay in bed longer. "Please lead the way," Katerina said, gesturing for Michael to go on first. He obliged and started walking out of the lake's shore, treading down the wooden pathway before eventually reaching the border between the quadrants. As soon as he stepped into the stone brick flooring, he heard the sounds of a lively market echoing out in front of him. He ignored the peddlers and walked towards the center of New Sparta, towards Zoviru's draconian tower. He walked ahead, while Katerina walked behind him, lagging just a few steps behind. Her gaze pierced right through his skull. She observed his every move, trying to figure out what made him so special that the professor deemed him worthy to become his one and only protege. "I never knew that the professor was in a school," Michael said, trying to start a conversation. "He didn't tell me anything about it." "It's not something we advertise," she replied. "Why? Is it supposed to be a secret or something?" he asked in a joking tone. But in truth, he was actually trying to prod for more information from her. Unfortunately, she didn't take the bait. "It's better for everyone if our school isn't mentioned. We have a lot of people who disagree with our teachings." Michael was thankful that Katerina was behind him because he couldn't hide the curiosity in his eyes. It seemed that his guess was true. Their secret organization had a lot of enemies, which was why they needed to keep themselves secret. "Why would people disagree with your curriculum? Are you teaching something dangerous?" Katerina went silent for a second before answering. "It's complicated. We believe in the natural way of things, while they believe in the artificial. They think it's the way to advance humanity and the world as a whole, but we believe that their teachings only lead to ruin." "Artificial," Michael repeated, memorizing this key word. "What kind of artificial way is that?" She stayed silent, refusing to answer. She knew that any answer she gave would give too much away. Seeing her intent to secrecy, Michael changed the subject. "And the professor's research, is it vital to making sure that this artificial way will be stopped?" She nodded. "My father hopes so." It seemed that the professor was doing all of this work not just for himself. He thought that the crazy old man was just obsessed with history for the sake of it. But as it turned out, he had a much grander reason for doing it. "We're here," Katerina said. Michael stopped just a few meters away from a tall stone brick spire towering just over the clouds. Before he knew it, they'd arrived at their destination. In front of him was the territory of the draconian Zoviru. He'd been so engrossed with asking her all of these questions that time seemed to completely pass him by. He even wished that the journey was a little bit longer so that he could prod her for more clues as to what this secret organization was really about. But at least now he knew that they were fighting an enemy whose teachings spread an artificial way in the world, and her, the professor, and their organization were fighting to fight against them. It was way too early to tell if they were the good guys or bad guys in this scenario, but judging from his first impression of Katerina, she didn't seem all that bad. How do we get inside? Do we just knock?" he asked out loud. Katerina was about to step forward, when she stopped and looked up at the skies. "Looks like we don't have to." A large winged creature cast a shadow towards them. Michael looked up, only to see a red dragon above them slowly flapping its wings as it made its descent towards the top of the tower. With each beat of its wings, Michael and Katerina felt the disturbance in the air down below. This was the first time Michael had seen a dragon up close. They looked like everything he'd ever seen in fantasy books and TV shows back in his previous life. Their skin was full of scales, and in this case, this red dragon's entire body was covered in a velvet red glossy scale that further made it stand out against the blue background of the skies. It had 4 legs and a giant tail with fire billowing out from the end of it. Its snout signaled mightiness and its jaws signaled tyrannical strength. I can see now why they call them the most dominant species in the world. If all of the Draconians can transform into a giant dragon like that, then they could easily siege a city like Metropolis with just a few of them working together. Unable to hold on to his curiosity, he subtly let out his drone and its vision to peek at the inner workings of a dragon. And as he did, he saw a similar sight as when he peered at the blind old woman. Their bodies were overflowing with ability power. Every inch of their skin emanated threads, acting as their own fur. It was insane to see up close. Just by the mere amount of ability power populating their body, Michael could tell that they were physically strong to the point where it defied reality. Their strengths rivaled that of the werewolves in their transformed state. Ability power coursed through their veins in order to make their brute strength go beyond what was even possible. However, there were distinct differences between the two. If the werewolves were like these untangled mess of ability power that emphasized pure strength over everything, then the Draconians had a much more refined arrangement of threads that perfectly weaved through their body like a circuit. Michael could tell that the dragons had a much wider use of their power than the werewolves. They could change their use of ability power from a physical force to a magical force just like a flick of a switch. Werewolves sacrificed their ability to change the world around them like magicians in order to maximize their strength, while Draconians were a good mix of both. Draconians must have incredible control of their body with how well their ability power was integrated into their bodies. But as he thought that, the red dragon in the skies suddenly crashed into the tower he was supposed to land on. Chunks and debris of stone bricks flew through the air as the dragon's wings scraped by the tip of the roof. After that failed landing, the dragon circled back around until it faced the tower once again. Its flight was unsteady, with its wings flapping unevenly and causing it to tilt more on one side than the other. "What the hell?" he muttered out. Katerina shook her head as she took her focus away from the stumbling dragon. "Typical," she mumbled before walking towards the base of the tower. As soon as she did, a red portal swirled in front of her. "Come in," she said, stepping towards the portal. "Wait, we didn't get permission yet." "We don't need to. He's drunk," she said as she disappeared into the portal. That explains it. When he thought about his first interaction with Zoviru, it completely made sense. The guy was completely chaotic and wanted nothing more than to be entertained. Heck, he was even willing to give up the antique just because he thought that it was interesting to see them fight over it. Someone like that would definitely enjoy a good cup of wine a few times a week. So he followed Katerina and stepped into the red portal. As soon as he did, a lavish room opened up to him. Everything was laden with gold and expensive gemstones from the chairs, to the sofas, and all the way to the candelabras lighting up the whole place. This was even more than what kings and queens had back in the medieval period of his previous world. It would have been a really impressive sight to see if not for one small detail. It was all in a mess. They were looking at a literal mountain of gilded furniture, painting, and even literal gold bars just sitting there like a pile of trash. Michael couldn't believe it. It seemed that the rumor of dragons being hoarders was true, but he didn't think it would be to this extent. "Come on," Katerina said to him. She was already halfway through scaling up this gold mountain, using a gold statue of a dragon as her foothold to get over the apex and to the other side. And as she moved, hundreds of gold coins cascaded down towards Michael like a literal gold rain. Now, even though he was already obscenely rich in terms of gold coins, he was still tempted to pocket every single one of these things for himself. It was a waste. They could have been used to build more houses, roads, and all the infrastructure the nation of Reborn would need for the next year. Eventually, he climbed over the top of the gold mountain and was able to see down into the other side. And there at the bottom, laying down in a pile of gold coins like a snow angel, was Zoviru, the red-haired draconian. His cheeks were flushed and his breath reeked of alcohol. Michael could smell him even from far away. "Zoviru," Katerina called out to him. "Hyuk! Haa ha ha ha." The draconian seemed to be so inebriated that he didn't even notice that there were two strangers inside his tower. Michael followed Katerina, sliding down on nothing but gold coins until he eventually reached Zoviru. "Zoviru," Katerina called out again, this time using her feet to kick him in the arm. Michael raised his eyebrows. "Oi, oi, oi, your disguise is slipping," he wanted to say to her. She was supposed to be a historian like the professor, with no source of strength other than their intellect. Yet, she was acting so brash and rude to a literal dragon as if she didn't just see his intimidating form just a few minutes before this. Michael already knew beforehand of her true identity as a nascent spirit magnetic, so he understood why she acted so carefree in dealing with a draconian. But still, she wasn't hard for anyone to guess her true strength. "Ha!" Zoviru awoke, looking around groggily. His red, wild eyebrows were very expressive, to the point where Michael could basically hear his thoughts. "Who disturbed my sleep?" Then his eyes flashed over to Katerina. He squinted, saying, "Who are you? Oh, you look familiar." Zoviru was slurring his words and barfing in the middle of his sentence. He definitely wasn't in the right headspace to think clearly. Katerina definitely didn't appreciate this. Her twitching eyes showed her impatience. She knew just how carefree draconians could be, but she definitely didn't expect them to be like this. She was even wondering if it was better to go back in a better time because they weren't going to get anything from someone as drunk as Zoviru. But when Zoviru looked over to Michael, he recognized him immediately. You're that little one with the professor. Ha 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 ha. Welcome, welcome." Zoviru immediately got up off his feet and walked over to Michael, slapping his back. The man still looked deeply inebriated, but he could now be spoken to like a real person. This quick change in attitude completely surprised Katerina. "How are you and the professor?" "Excuse me," Zoviru said as he picked up a golden vase hand painted with intricate forest artistry laden with gemstones, and used it as a place to unload his vomit. One disgusting regurgitation later, Zoviru threw the incredibly expensive vase aside and faced Michael. He seemed less drunk now, which was nice. "Ha ha ha ha. You were right. Mauricio did lose. This was good news." Zoviru remembered the deal he made with Sergio. "I got lucky, I guess," he replied to Zoviru. "Luck or no luck, it definitely gave me a good show. I like you, small human. What's your name again?" "It's Kyo." Katerina stared as Zoviru continued to pat Michael on the back, her eyebrows raised. She was familiar with draconians. They weren't the type to like someone so easily. They liked to spend their time alone, so they were very selective with the group of people that they chose to socialize with. And even more so the people they chose to remember. And it seemed that Kyo became one of those people. It wasn't just the professor who seemed to see something in this kid. It was Zoviru as well. This proved more and more that there was something special with this kid that she just wasn't seeing. "Kyo, is it? What did you come here for?" Right? The antique." Zoviru immediately looked around his room and began rummaging through the piles and piles of expensive treasures just laying around. "Now where did I put that?" he mumbled. Eventually, Zoviru got bored and chose an easy way to look for it instead. He raised both his hands and slammed them on the ground, causing the entire pile of gold treasures to lift up into the air for a few moments. And in that moment, while everything was floating in the air, there was just one piece of item that remained on the floor. It was none other than the antique, a giant white tibia bone. "Ah, there it is," Zoviru said, holding it in one hand. "As promised, this antique now belongs to the professor." "Where is he?" "He's away on business," Katerina answered. "You can give it to me." But just as she was about to grab the antique from his hands, he yanked it away from her. I don't know you," he said. "This antique belongs to the professor, and I don't remember you being there." Then he turned to Michael. "This antique is yours for now. Give it to the professor once he's back." Michael stared at the giant white bone in front of him. Up close, he could see the thousands of scratches on its surface, some going a few inches deep while some barely at surface level. He hesitated to raise his hand. After all, he knew that the antique was laced with a strange ability power. It tested the blood of everyone it touched to see if they were worthy to receive its inheritance. Normally, Michael would jump at the chance. However, he wasn't sure if touching the antique would create some sort of reaction that would be visible to everyone present here in this room. He didn't even know if this inheritance was going to be good or not. Could be a trap. Touch it, Harbinger urged. There was excitement in his voice. I feel something familiar in there. Something familiar? Like what? Just touch it. It's not going to be dangerous. Well, at least for you. Our unique circumstance will allow us to safely traverse through the passage. Michael's eyebrows raised. Passage? Unable to sustain his curiosity any longer, he reached for the antique. His fingertips made contact with the rough surface of the bone, feeling the multiple cuts all around its surface. Each of them were sharp. He guessed that if he looked through them with a microscope, he would see a complete separation in the surface. No ordinary weapon could make such a perfect incision. Unsactioned blood retrieval detected. ChatJK5 warned. Would you like to temporarily disable the system's security? Yes. ChatJK5 remained silent, waiting for Michael's words. Do it, he said. He immediately felt a prick on his index finger as the invisible prismatic shield surrounding his hands vanished. Absolute Unity Defense disabled, allowing a foreign power to injure him with a pin prick. A drop of blood leaked onto the antique surface, immediately sinking into the many cuts all around the bone. And suddenly, his pupils dilated, almost becoming the same size as his irises. His vision became blurry before the world began to turn all around him. It was nauseating. Harbinger, what's happening? Cuckoo. We're going for a ride. As soon as Harbinger said that, an incredible suction force began pulling Michael towards the bone. He felt as if the antique suddenly turned into a black hole, pulling him in at an intense force that light couldn't even escape from. The whole world blurred as he zoomed towards the bone until his entire vision was just black. A second later, he stumbled forwards, finally feeling solid ground underneath his feet. It took him a second before he could center himself. He still felt a little bit nauseous after that little ride. Che, where am I? He began to look around, only to see floating ruins around him made out of some kind of reflective obsidian with gold lining. Roof tiles floated aimlessly on pure black skies. A severed balcony hung upside down, and a wide winding staircase led up to nothing, with its remaining parts being shattered and floating across air. The only thing that stood tall was an obelisk made out of the same obsidian-like material with streaks of gold. It exhibited no signs of wear and tear, standing proudly as if it had just been created recently. There's no gravity here, he remarked. He felt weightless. He could move freely in all directions, without any restraints, as if flying in outer space. He would have thought he was in space, seeing as the skies were completely black and dark, except for the fact that there were no stars or heavenly bodies that should have littered the skies. It was bleak all around. Is this another case of someone plucking me out? This wasn't the first time he experienced a forced teleportation. Kuno did it to him. However, this felt like a different situation. He knew no place on Earth that had no gravity like this one. Either way, he did the first thing he wanted to check was to see if he could get out of here. He closed his eyes and used his supreme talent, sensing all the mana particles in the air to see if he could connect with the shadows he left behind in the nation of Reborn. Blips of mana appeared in his vision, all having the colors representing the different mana elements. At least the mana density here is normal. And as far as he could tell, there was no magic, mana, or ability power that was locking him into this place like Kuno's underground castle. He could theoretically leave any time he wanted. Hopeful, he tried to conjure up a magic spell. All those globules of mana began floating towards his body, getting absorbed into his skin in the most natural way. His body was now glowing with a white undertone. And as the mana in his body reached saturation, he manifested a black magic circle underneath his feet. It caused his own shadow to move and expand outwards, breaking the limits of 2 dimensions and encompassing his entire body in a cocoon. As his mana reached a climax, he commanded his shadow to go beyond this dimension and travel him back to the nation of Reborn. More and more mana from the surroundings began shooting towards him with an intense attractive force. The cocoon began to glow white, starting from the bottom and slowly reaching towards the top. But just as the light reached halfway through, he suddenly found himself unable to supply it with mana any longer. Michael opened his eyes, looking around and noticing that all the mana in this place was gone. All of it had been used to have the shadow teleportation spell only 50% of the way through. Michael couldn't believe it. Where am I? The mana requirements for this spell was incredibly large. It was even way bigger than when he traveled to the Forbidden Island in the Elven Kingdom. And according to the maps he saw, that was already halfway across the entire world. It didn't even make sense. This teleportation required at least twice more than when he traveled to the Elven Kingdom. This meant that this place should be at least twice as far as the Elven Kingdom and the Royal Continent. But there was no place that should be farther than that. The only conclusion he could reach was that this was a pocket dimension. Since the antique was designed back in the ancient era, there was probably some kind of magic in it that caused it to be so far away from where he was. Harbinger. How do I get out of this place? He didn't panic just yet. Since Harbinger urged him to touch the antique, he assumed that his diva knew what he was doing and that there was an exit plan somewhere in that robot's mind. Cuckoo, how would I know? Michael slapped his own forehead. Don't worry, this place doesn't look like it's designed to be escaped. It looked like it's designed to be conquered. Look at the obelisk. He did as Harbinger instructed and stared at the obelisk. This time, he brought out his drone, which was thankfully transported with him into this place. And as he used his drone vision, he suddenly saw a startling discovery. The obelisk was brimming with ability power. He had never seen any item that was filled with ability power. It should only be found on magnetics or beastfolk. But the presence of ability power wasn't the only thing that was startling about the obelisk. It's the way that it was arranged. His drone vision allowed him to see threads of ability power arranged into familiar shapes. At the center of the structure was a pair of handprints, with arrows pointing towards it from all sides. Michael stared at the obelisk in complete awe. He didn't even know that ability power could be placed in such a deliberate way. It felt like it had been sewn into the very surface of the obelisk from a seamstress that used ability power as her thread. Cuckoo, what are you waiting for? Put your hand on it, Harbinger urged. But of course, Michael was a little bit cautious to do so. The last time he touched a magical object from the ancient era, he found himself in this place with no way to escape. Touching the obelisk is the only way to exit this place, said Harbinger. Don't you see what they left us? This is a challenge. The 2 handprints on the obelisk were surrounded by arrows that made sure that the handprints couldn't be missed by anyone who saw it. Even with a language barrier, anyone with a decent intellect could decipher what the designers of this place were trying to say. Put your hands here, it said. Michael was not a kid. He wasn't going to touch something just because someone told him to do so. He'll experiment with it first. So, he piloted the drone closer to the obelisk, trying to see if there were any other clues he could gather from the obelisk. He hoped he could see what the designer of this place intended for him by touching the obelisk, but aside from the arrows and the handprints, there was nothing special about the obelisk. Once he was sure, he flew the drone towards the obelisk, letting its frame gently touch the handprint on the surface. There was no response. Looks like it wants me to be the one to touch it. He conjured a simple spell, a magic circle appearing on the ground just a meter from his side. Mana began to flow towards his body just like when he tried to use his shadow teleportation skill. Except this time, the mana requirements were extremely low in comparison. The mana formed to completion, allowing a shadowy figure to emerge from the magic circle. A second later, the shadow dripped down from the figure's body and revealed its true form. It was a perfect clone of Michael, down to the very atom. The only thing different about this clone was the Godforge pieces in his heart. This clone didn't have any. He commanded his clone to approach the obelisk and put its hands on the handprint. As soon as it did, the whole obelisk suddenly started glowing in a subtle white light. Then, the golden streaks on the obsidian surface of the obelisk emitted some kind of smoke that flowed down and gathered around the clone. Since the clone was connected to him just like his drone, he could feel the sensation it was feeling. The fog was cold and it permeated his entire body. He could feel it searching his body, trying to search for something. Then it reached his mana cores. And suddenly, the tip of the obelisk began to give off a very bright light, its rays spreading outwards in 8 equal parts. It continued to grow brighter and brighter as the fog permeated through every cell of Michael's clone, until it reached his heart. It searched through every ventricle but didn't find the object it was looking for. At the same moment, the fog began to retreat back into the obelisk's golden streaks. The tip of the obelisk grew dimmer and dimmer, its rays becoming indistinguishable from each other, until it all finally turned dark. The obelisk turned dormant, not having found what it was looking for. My mana cores caused the obelisk to become active. I'm guessing that if it also found Godforge pieces, it would have continued to activate into completion. It seemed that he had to touch the obelisk himself if he wanted to see what it would do. But at least now he knew that touching it wasn't immediately dangerous. Before he did though, he decided to explore this place a little bit. He piloted his drone to fly straight up, trying to get a better view of this place. He didn't have to fly that high to see that he was standing on a small island that was surrounded by nothing but complete and utter darkness. Curious, he decided to pilot his drone out of this island to explore outwards. But as soon as he reached the very edge, he suddenly felt an intense feeling in his gut. It was dread and fear. His intuition was telling him that if he tried to cross through the chasm, then he would lose his drone forever. He quickly flew backwards, now wary of the space beyond the island. What is that? It's a power beyond the nascent spirit, Harbinger said. If you want to escape from this place, then you should just jump into the abyss. Don't joke around, Harbinger. I'm serious, Harbinger said. The power in this abyss looks completely identical to the one that caused us to be transported into this place. If you jump into it, you'll leave this place. But if you do, it's extremely likely that you won't be able to come back. Essentially, this was an escape route that he could go into whenever he wanted. But he was never going back. It was a one-way ticket. He felt very secure knowing that he could exit if he needed. But he had no plans of doing so. The obelisk was still calling to him. It may be dangerous, but it could also be fortuitous. According to the professor, the cuts on the bone talked about an inheritance that only the worthy can obtain. He wanted that inheritance. And it looked like this was the only chance he was going to get, so he was definitely going to take it. He walked towards the obelisk and put both of his hands onto the handprint. The obelisk began glowing again, but with an even greater intensity than last time. Smoke emanated out of the golden streaks, eventually surrounding him from all sides. It checked his mana cores, and upon contact, the tip of the obelisk began glowing with a yellow light. The 8 rays that manifested began to sweep the ground, moving down until eventually reaching the top, pointing directly at the deep dark space above them. Finally, the fog spread to his heart, his Godforge pieces pumping out obalty power. As soon as the fog felt the threads coming out of his heart, it suddenly began swirling into a tornado. Michael found himself in the middle of the storm made out of fog. And just then, a pillar of light burst out of the obelisk, reaching up to the endless dark skies above. A few seconds later, the fog dispersed. Then, nothing. The obelisk continued to give off an intense pillar of light that reached upwards, but nothing happened after that. And when he looked at the surface, he saw that the 2 handprints were gone along with the arrows that pointed to it. It was now replaced with 3 locks, each one bigger than the last one. The one on the very left was fractured into 8 distinct parts and was currently pulsating and glowing with light. Just like with the handprint, these locks were made out of sewed ability power threads that were engraved onto the very surface of the obelisk. The leftmost lock was the only one glowing right now. The other 2 were dormant, not giving any light at all. What's with this lock? Michael asked himself. It was pulsating with light, like it was breathing. But then, as the seconds passed, he noticed that the frequency of pulses were becoming faster and faster. Not only that, but it was accompanied by a high-pitched ticking sound as if it was a timer. It wasn't long before the first lock was about to reach its end, releasing a bright light accompanied by a high-pitched noise as if a bomb was about to go off. Michael immediately retreated back and conjured a protected wall around him, expecting an explosion to go off. But a few seconds later, nothing happened. He peeked out of the wall and saw that the leftmost lock on the obelisk was still glowing with light, but it was no longer pulsating. It was static. But that wasn't the only thing different. He looked up and saw that just beside the upside-down balcony, there was a spherical object floating in the black skies. It was made out of some kind of dark gray stone the size of a watermelon. It was just floating in the skies, not giving off any sense of danger at all. At least it's not a bomb. Just like before, he used his drone for reconnaissance. He piloted it to come closer to the spherical object and observe it in its entirety. The first thing he noticed was the complete lack of power inside it. Unlike the obelisk, there weren't any power threads anywhere on its surface. Instead, there was a simple carving of what looked like an image of a leaf inscribed on the top. What is this supposed to do? He looked around the island and found nothing else of interest. This spherical object was the only thing that had changed after the obelisk was activated. He also manifested a clone to touch the object, to no avail. And after a few minutes of thinking, he decided to touch it himself. But still, there was no reaction. It took him 30 minutes of cluelessly fumbling around as he tried to. Harbinger, what kind of test is this? He was prepared to fight off whatever alien-like monster that the obelisk threw at him. But instead, it just gave him a stone ball that did absolutely nothing. The worst part was that the obelisk gave him no clue as to what he was supposed to do. At least before, it gave him the courtesy of putting arrows at the handprints as a clue. Perhaps it is asking you to destroy the spherical object, ChatJK5 suggested. The designer would have conjured stairs if they wanted someone to touch the spherical object. And after numerous futile attempts earlier, it is safe to assume that they want you to destroy it. Maybe you're right. He raised his hand, his index finger pointing at the spherical object. His strongest attack was his Unity gun. All 8 elements gathered at his hand, combining to create a bright white light that emanated a destructive power. A second later, an instantaneous light beam shot off his finger and hit the spherical object right in the middle. Yet, it still floated there unbothered. The Unity gun didn't even leave a single scratch. The spherical object was just hit by one of the most destructive power anyone had ever seen, yet it still remained intact. Michael couldn't believe it. What the hell is this thing made out of? Now, he was completely clueless on how to destroy this thing. That was his strongest attack. The only other technique he could think of was his quantum slash, but that required an enormous amount of energy, 3 full batteries. He simply didn't have that much on hand. Wait, what was that inscription again? He piloted his drone to move atop the spherical object, and there, he saw the image of a leaf carved onto its surface. What if this isn't a leaf? What if it means earth mana? It was a long shot, but he decided to try it anyway. After his Unity gun proved useless, he knew that he had to try any idea that came his way. He raised his hand, beckoning all the earth mana in the air towards him. Invisible green blobs of light clumped atop his palms, manifesting as pure earth energy. This was the purest magic he could conjure. With the ball of earth mana stuck firmly above his palms, he then turned and pointed it at the spherical object. With a single thought, pure earth magic shot outwards at a leisurely speed. It was slower than an arrow but faster than a throw. It hit the spherical object squarely on its surface, with the earth mana shattering into fragments that covered the entirety of the object. A few seconds later, the object emanated a neon green light. Then, it began to shake violently until it exploded into a million pieces that dispersed into the wind. All that was left was a green mote of light that floated where the spherical object was placed before. Ting! Michael turned around and saw one part of the first lock suddenly glow green, followed by a high-pitched noise as if a bell was struck right in its sweet spot. Soon after, another spherical object manifested out of the fragments that the previous one. This time, it was positioned a few meters opposite the green mode of light. I think I know how to solve this puzzle. He piloted his drone to fly atop the new spherical object and saw the shape sculpted on its surface. This time, it was in the shape of a flame. Without even thinking about it, Michael conjured pure fire mana in his palms, the same way he did with the pure earth magic. He pointed the red clump of pure fire magic and shot it towards the spherical object. It hit the object's surface and shattered into individual fire mana that surrounded the object in its entirety. Struck with this energy, the object began glowing with a red light before starting to violently shake. And just like before, the spherical object exploded into a million pieces, leaving behind a small blob of red light in its place. "I knew it!" he exclaimed. After the explosion, a satisfying ding echoed from the obelisk before the next part of the first lock glowed red. This was followed by the creation of a new spherical object in the black sky. "This puzzle is testing my ability to use all 8 elements," he concluded. Those spherical objects were invulnerable to any and all attacks, except for a single specific mana element that was inscribed on top of its surface. He'd been so used to using his Unity gun and his ability powers as his main source of attack that he completely neglected to think about his magic. With the puzzle solved, all that's left was to destroy 6 more spherical objects to complete the first lock. Just as he predicted, each of the spherical objects could only be destroyed by a specific mana. After figuring this out, the rest became extremely easy. It wasn't long before the final spherical object appeared in the skies. This time, it had the image of a ray of light inscribed onto its surface. With a simple light magic, Michael finally destroyed the last spherical object in the black skies. All that's left from its debris was a mote of white light that joined the other motes of lights around it. They were arranged in a circle with the obelisk at the center. Curiously enough, the motes of light perfectly coincided with the rays of light that came out from the obelisk when he first activated it. What kind of material is that? Even after finishing the test, Michael still couldn't get his mind off of that strange spherical object. He wanted to know what it was made out of. The fact that it could withstand Unity made it extremely interesting to him. If it could withstand Unity, then it was basically invulnerable to all damage. No one in the world could destroy it. But just as he was having this thought, the sound of the lock shattering echoed out into the island. Finally, the first lock was completed, having all its parts illuminated by the 8 elements. This would have been cause for celebration, but suddenly, the different parts of the lock began to move closer and closer together until finally, it smashed together, forming a single part. A shockwave emanated from the obelisk, making Michael wary of his surroundings. Something was coming. His intuition proved to be right as a mysterious form of light suddenly shot out from the obelisk's tip, landing right in front of Michael. It stood on a pair of feet with 2 hands at its side. This figure was a faceless humanoid. Michael's eyes widened as he subconsciously went on a defensive stance. It wasn't the fact that he was facing a humanoid. It was because of what it was made out of. This mysterious figure was made out of pure prismatic light, its entire body shining in the different colors of the 8 elements. It was made out of Unity. It didn't wield Unity like he did. It was Unity itself. Michael couldn't believe his eyes. He was facing an enemy unlike anything he had ever faced before. He didn't even think that this was possible. The only magic he could conjure with Unity was his Unity gun, which was just a basic beam that shot in a straight line. That was the only thing he could create with Unity. And when he tried to experiment with other uses, they all ended up as a massive failure. Combining all 8 elements was a delicate procedure. A single mistake could cause an explosion that could level entire cities. Unity Gun was a spell that harvested that power into a controlled explosion, much like how real guns worked. Because of this, he thought that Unity was a spell that cannot be contained. It was a volatile explosion that needed to be released as soon as possible. Yet now, he was looking at a complete reversal of everything he ever thought was possible. This Unity creature acted like a real object. It felt solid, which was something that contradicted everything Unity was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a destructive power, something that wrecked anything it touched. Despite this, the Unity creature was standing on solid footing instead of falling through to the bottom. It should have been burning through the very ground it stood on, yet the soil underneath its feet remained intact. How was this creature created? It was only now did it dawn on him that the creator of this space was way beyond him in his current stage. Not only were they stronger, but they seemed to know everything about the world while he still remained clueless. Faced with such a large gap in knowledge, most people would feel helpless. But not Michael. There was just a single thought forming in his head. ChatJK5, can we analyze this creature? He wanted to see if he could replicate it. But while he was in the middle of this thought, the Unity creature suddenly disappeared from his sight. Michael instinctively ran backwards. But it was too late. The Unity creature reappeared right in front of him, its two arms raised above its head. Then it slammed it towards his chest. His absolute Unity defense, immediately activated as if felt a foreign force trying to hurt his physical body. This defense of his had stood against incredibly strong attacks, even those from a first-stage nascent spirit magnetic for a brief second. Yet as soon as the Unity creature's hands touched it, Michael's prismatic shield immediately shattered into pieces. At the very last second, Michael raised his hand as he felt an intense force slam him down on his back. The force knocked the wind out of his chest, blood following soon after. A few of his ribs were immediately broken, causing some of his organs to be pierced alongside it. With the Unity creature sitting on top of him, he knew that he was in an extremely vulnerable position. He activated his shadow teleportation skill to escape. A dark shadow began to creep from under him, quickly covering his entire body. But before it could even finish its formation, the Unity creature raised its arm and slammed it into Michael's body. Immediately, the shadow forming on Michael's arms sizzled before disintegrating into mist. With just a single attack, his teleportation skill was destroyed. But that wasn't enough. The Unity creature raised its hands again and began hammering Michael with slam after slam. Michael had his arms raised the entire time to protect his body and his head, but the force was too much. His skin began disintegrating as well, with his body's natural mana getting destroyed with each slam. Not only that, but the bones in his forearms began to break, cracks spreading around its surface. And with the last slam, his guard was broken. The Unity creature hammered straight into his chest again, further causing massive internal damage. He had never been hurt this bad before. The pain was excruciating. Painless protocol enacted, ChatJK5 announced. And suddenly, the severe blunt trauma in his chest disappeared. The pain was no longer clouding his mind, allowing him to think much more clearly than before. Immediately, he reached into his drone and piloted it himself. With a single command, the two barrels on the drone's underside adjusted themselves and pointed straight towards the Unity creature. It began to glow with a prismatic power before an instantaneous beam shot straight into its target. It hit the Unity creature's shoulder, making it recoil backwards in pain. It jumped back, its headless face staring at the drone above it. This finally gave Michael the break he needed. He immediately jumped backwards, conjuring a simple healing spell as he did so. He sucked in all of the light mana in the air, forcing them all to cover all the injuries in his body. Bathed with this magic, his shattered bones began mending and his pierced organs began to regrow its holes. In a few seconds, the near-fatal injuries that plagued him were healed back to the way it was before. Michael could finally take a big breath, his lungs no longer punctured. He looked at the Unity creature and found it clutching its injured shoulder. It was hurt. Just then, the Unity creature suddenly disappeared, before reappearing right in front of his drone high up in the air. Its hands were outstretched, trying to grab at the flying weapon that caused it to be injured. Michael immediately piloted the drone, using one of its features to rapidly eject one of his switches, intending to pause the Unity creature's momentum. A spring-loaded mechanism launched the switch directly in the creature's chest, firmly attaching to it and sending back a signal towards Michael's chest. An ability power thread spooled out of his Godforge pieces and wrapped around the switch, before the switch released a newly processed thread towards the Unity creature's entire body like a cocoon. The cocoon glowed with power, trying to alter reality and stop the Unity creature's momentum entirely. But as his ability was getting activated, the Unity creature spread his hands apart and broke through the cocoon, the threads getting burned into nothing. The switch fell out of the Unity creature's chest, unable to even activate for a single instant. The creature grabbed onto the drone, grasping it in its Unity-filled hands. The drone's frame suddenly began sizzling as Unity began to break down its very molecular structure. Michael's drone vision began to shake, static crowding the image. If the Unity creature continued to hold the drone in its hands, it would do irreparable damage to the mithril artifact. Michael immediately raised his own hand, pointed it at the Unity creature, and fired off a shot of Unity gun. A beam of prismatic light shot from his index finger right towards the Unity creature's back, making it lurch forward in pain and allowing the drone to escape from its grasp. The drone flew towards Michael, keeping close to him. So only Unity can hurt Unity. Looks like this test is designed to see if I can use Unity. Just like with the previous test, there was only one win condition for him to succeed. It was the 8 elements before, but now it was the combination of all of them. Unity. With the Unity creature hurt, it looked back at Michael, its faceless head staring at him. Michael kept his hand up, index finger already lighting up as he loaded up another shot of Unity gun. And beside him, his drone's barrels lit up with a similar light. Michael didn't wait for the Unity creature to move and fired both shots of Unity gun. The beams traveled almost instantaneously towards the Unity creature, both shots aimed at the head. But in that same instant, the Unity creature's figure blurred as it disappeared and reappeared a few meters away from the shots. I won't be able to shoot it as easily as before, Michael realized. Since it's also made out of Unity, the Unity gun's instantaneous shot would almost look as slow as a snail in its perspective. This meant that a straightforward shot won't work on it. He needed to shoot it when it was distracted, when it wasn't looking at him. But its faceless head staring directly at him made this extremely hard. It already knew that he and his drone could shoot a Unity gun. The injury on its shoulder and back made it remember the one who wounded it very clearly. So it was very wary of them at all times. It wanted to enact revenge. It shot towards Michael at incredible speeds, shooting down like a meteor. Thankfully, Michael still had one technique up his sleeve. He reached down into his pockets and retrieved a very special switch. The Unity creature arrived in front of him, with its hands raised above its head, ready to crush him into the ground. At the very last moment, he clicked the switch in his hands, releasing the hidden Unity beam in the iron block. The Unity creature slammed down its hand towards Michael's chest, before a single beam appeared between them. The expected slam didn't occur. An arm made out of Unity fell onto the ground beside Michael, before exploding into motes of differently colored lights. Michael cut off one of its arms with his Unity saber. He didn't even have to move his weapon and simply let the Unity creature's arm fall straight towards the blade. He wanted to take this opportunity to swing his Unity saber again towards the Unity creature, but it quickly retreated to the skies, holding the stump of its severed arm in pain. Michael waved his Unity saber in the air, challenging the Unity creature to charge towards him again. With this weapon in hand, the creature would find it hard to approach him without one of its limbs getting cut off. The Unity creature then released its grip from its stump and pointed it at Michael. The tip of its index finger began to glow with the same prismatic light as Michael's Unity gun. No way. In the next instant, a beam of light instantaneously shot towards Michael, hitting him in the shoulder. It burned a hole through his bones and muscle, leaving through the other side. He immediately conjured light mana again, healing the injury he sustained from the creature's Unity gun. Copied my spell? That's unfair. At least he could console himself with the fact that he could heal himself, while the Unity creature remained injured. But this still posed a problem. The Unity gun was far too fast for him to react to. Unlike the creature, he didn't have an almost instantaneous reaction time. ChatJK5. I can't react fast enough. Already on it, Michael. Creating an algorithm that predicts the Unity creature's shots. Completed. Suddenly, his vision changed as a new interface with grid lines everywhere, including the Unity creature. And just as the Unity creature pointed its index finger towards him, Michael suddenly saw a change in the interface, now with a dotted line that went from the Unity creature's finger towards his chest. On top of it was the words, 99% probability, the Unity gun was going to hit him in the chest. Knowing this information, he didn't have to react the moment it was shot. He could prepare for it. Then, the light in the Unity creature's finger reached a climax, releasing a burst of instantaneous light that shot towards Michael's chest, just as ChatJK5 predicted. And just as it was about to hit his torso, Michael raised his hand and positioned his Unity saber in a direct line of sight from the shot. The beam of light hit the Unity saber's blade, creating prismatic sparks that flew everywhere, before reflecting off and hitting the ground behind him. Michael stared at his weapon, a smile growing in his face. Perfect parry. That was one of his most beloved features in any single-player game that he played. It was extremely satisfying to see shots perfectly bounce back towards its shooter. It made him want to do the same to the Unity creature. The Unity creature raised its hands again, a shot building in its finger. Michael held his Unity saber in hand and readied himself for a perfect parry. Just then, ChatJK5 gave him another prediction with a 97% accuracy. Finally, the shot beamed towards him, and with a careful and precise movement, he swung his Unity saber upwards. The beam of prismatic light hit the blade perfectly in its center, before Michael continued with a follow-through that sent the beam shooting back towards its sender. The Unity creature tried to dodge its own attack, but was unable to come away unscathed in time. It hit its stomach, making it recoil backwards in pain. It was now hunched forwards, its prismatic body starting to dim. The Unity creature seemed extremely hurt, as if it was on the verge of its destruction. Michael nodded to himself, knowing that all he had to do was parry a few more shots and he could kill this Unity creature and finish the Obelix test. Unfortunately, the Unity creature didn't make that easy. Despite having its shot reflected back at it, the Unity creature readied up another shot of Unity gun aimed at Michael. It fired without a moment's hesitation. And thanks to ChatJK5's predictions, Michael was able to accurately deflect the shot back towards the Unity creature, aiming directly at its head. But this time, the Unity creature didn't make any gestures for escape. It simply raised its hand and waited for the reflected Unity shot to come towards him. And as it zoomed directly at its head, the Unity creature simply swatted the Unity beam downwards, reflecting it back and hitting one of the stacks of debris floating in the dark black skies. Michael pursed his lips. Damn, it's learning from all my moves. The Unity creature had been using all of Michael's techniques against him. He was able to injure the creature at first, but it would always find a way to either replicate his moves or have a way to counteract it. And with it having learned a perfect parry, Michael's choices became severely limited. Every shot of his would simply get reflected back at him, and they would get stuck in a constant loop of reflections until somebody made a mistake. Just then, the Unity creature finally made a move. It zoomed forwards, its hands stretched forwards as if it was going to pierce Michael's body with it. And while it was in the middle of this movement, it fired off a single shot of unit gun. Michael could only react a half-beat later, positioning his Unity saber at an awkward spot. It successfully deflected the prismatic beam away from Michael's body, but was unable to reflect it back at its sender. It landed behind him, scorching the soil and creating a plume of dust that spread in the air. And while Michael's Unity saber was in this awkward spot after deflecting the shot, the Unity creature took that opportunity to throw a gut punch towards Michael. The punch landed, knocking the wind out of Michael. But just as the Unity creature was winding up for another punch, a beam of light pierced shot towards its head. It was able to dodge away, with the beam grazing past its cheeks. The two jumped backwards, creating separation. And without delay, Michael's injury from the gut punch immediately started healing as the light mana in the air gathered around his torso. The Unity creature was worse for wear despite the shot only grazing past its head. "I can do this all day," Michael sneered at the Unity creature. And with that provocation, the Unity creature disappeared from his sight and reappeared above him, targeting the annoying drone that had shot him. It grasped onto the drone's Unity gun barrels with its only hand and yanked as hard as it could, trying to destroy the weapons that caused its injuries. Michael immediately fired a Unity gun at the Unity creature, hoping to force it to let go of the drone. But the Unity creature instead lowered its body and headbutted the prismatic beam downwards, deflecting it back towards Michael. The Unity gun shot pierced straight through the ground, with Michael nowhere to be seen. He reappeared behind the Unity creature, with his Unity saber in both hands. He swung it down, aiming for the creature's back. Finally, it let go of the drone and quickly turned around. It used its hand and swung it towards the Unity saber. As the two Unity weapons clashed, prismatic sparks emanated outwards. However, in a battle against two equally strong Unity powers, the one with the most speed would win. The Unity saber split in half, its upper part tumbling down into the ground before dissipating into motes of differently colored lights. Michael immediately retreated back, with his drone following just above him. He looked at the switch in his hands before quickly tossing it out and retrieving a new one from his pockets. And with a single click, a new Unity saber appeared in his hands. "I told you, I can do this all day," he said. But as much confidence as he was trying to portray, he knew that this parity between them wouldn't last. Right now, they were evenly matched. But it won't be long before Michael started to lose his resources. The light mana in the air was limited. It wasn't a small amount, but it would run out eventually, meaning he wouldn't be able to heal his wounds forever. And second of all, his drone was starting to become worse for wear. With each contact it had with the Unity creature, its frames were getting more and more disintegrated to the point where it could malfunction if it got into contact with that creature for a little bit longer. It seemed that the Unity creature knew that and was actively targeting it now instead of him. "I have one last gambit," he thought. "I have to find the right opportunity or else the Unity creature will just adapt and copy my moves." After thinking about it some more, he decided to let the Unity creature do what it wanted. He let the drone fly away from him. The Unity creature immediately took the bait, rushing towards the flying object, intent on destroying the Unity gun underneath its frame. Michael, on the other hand, piloted the drone and subtly made one move. A compartment on the drone's underside suddenly opened up to reveal a much bigger barrel, one similar to that of the cannons that could be seen on ships. This was the Unity bomb, Michael's last trump card. The Unity creature seemed to have noticed this change in the drone. With the large cannon barrel pointed at its head, the Unity creature sensed the inherent danger coming from the drone and immediately tried to run away. Michael fired the Unity bomb. The Unity creature was able to run away for a few meters thanks to the Unity bomb's slow release, but as soon as it left the barrel and fell to the air, Michael immediately triggered its explosion. A large shockwave of pure destruction emanated from the Unity bomb, destroying all kinds of mana in the air. The explosion sent everything flying off into the dark abyss. Bits and pieces of debris floating in the dark skies crossed over the boundary of the island before instantly disappearing into nothingness. The Unity creature was fast, but it wasn't fast enough. It was laying on the ground, with its lower body completely missing after the explosion sent it crashing onto the very edge of the island. Its indomitable prismatic skin, which would have burned through anything it touched, was slowly melting, motes of light dispersing in the wind, as the effects of the bomb lingered on. The Unity creature tried to gather the melting mana in its body, but found no success. Could not heal itself. And even if it could, it would take a few more minutes before the mana in the air completely stabilized. Michael would not wait that long. He approached the Unity creature, each step the only thing echoing in the island. Otherwise, it was silent. Michael knew he won. He would just have to wait a few more seconds before the Unity creature completely melted into pure mana in the air. But he didn't. He approached carefully, his eyes completely focused on the missing lower part of its body. It was a perfect dissection, allowing him to see the inner workings of the Unity creature. And in his mind, ChatJK5 was furiously working out the calculations as it began to analyze the very nature of this Unity creature. How it was moving, how could it stay intact, and most of all, how it was made. He wanted to copy the Unity creature for himself. And just as he approached the Unity creature, It looked up at him with its faceless head and performed what could only be described as a snarl. This was a creature that knew that it was in its death throes. And in pure desperation, it raised its only hand and flung it towards Michael. With its body melting, the arm flew out of the Unity creature's shoulder socket cleanly and rocketed off towards Michael at an extremely fast pace. And in the air, the arm continued to melt off and began to form a perfect conical tip that was aimed straight at Michael. The Unity bomb was powerful. It negated all mana in the air for a few minutes. This meant that Michael should just be as vulnerable to the effects of the bomb as the Unity creature. But just as the arm was about to hit him, Michael flicked a switch in his chest. He paused the effects of the bomb on himself, allowing him to use magic. A Unity saber flashed beside him before he swung it in front of him, perfectly cutting the severed arm in half. It exploded into motes of light, becoming pure mana that dissolved in the air. The Unity creature laid on the ground, unable to even hold its upright with both of its hands gone. It looked up as Michael approached. "Thanks for the lesson," he said as a notification rang in his head. "Analyzation complete. You are now able to create your own Unity creature." Michael raised his hand, motes of mana immediately gathering at his palms. The beads of melting mana in the Unity creature's body began to float off from the ground and reach Michael's hands, forming into a revolving spherical ball made out of pure Unity mana. And suddenly, his head felt warm as a wave of information crashed through his head. ChatJK5 gave him the exact magic theory that led to the Unity creature's creation. And now he was going to replicate it himself. Following the instructions in his head, he began to mold the Unity sphere in his hands. And with his other hand, he reached out and beckoned for the Unity creature to come towards him. The Unity creature's half-lifeless body floated up, its faceless head showing acceptance in the face of this new development. With one hand containing the molded Unity sphere, and the other controlling the half-body of the Unity creature, Michael clapped his hands together, mixing the two. The Unity creature would become the framework for his new creation. The rotating sphere of prismatic Unity shot towards the Unity creature, exploding into motes of light as it clashed onto its chest. Pure mana began to surround the Unity creature as Michael commanded them to start reforming its body. Motes of light gathered and bunched together, slowly forming the two missing arms on the creature. Michael spread his hands even further as he began to tap into the mana of the entire environment in this island. More and more mana began to flow towards the Unity creature, slowly rebuilding its body into something new, into something better. And as Michael went through this process, he began to understand why the designer of this obelisk made him go through the first test. It made him realize the importance of each individual mana element. Unity may be one of the strongest powers in the world, but it cannot be created without those basic elements. If he hadn't gone through that test, Michael wouldn't have thought to arrange the water mana in the Unity creature to become veins that supplied power. He wouldn't have known to put fire in the very fibers that made up the muscle structure of the Unity creature, nor earth for its skin and organs, nor air for the boundary that separated all mana structures to prevent explosion. Poison allowed the natural death and recycling of mana in the structure. Lightning bestowed power and movement, dark for the shadow that kept its form, and most importantly, the light that tied it all together to become life. And with the combination of all those systems, he brought into this world a new creature in the likeness of his own, a human. Finally, the Unity creature had been reformed, with its arms, feet, and head having so much more definition than before. And underneath the prismatic skin, one could see the outlines of a pair of eyes, a nose, a lips, ears, and even fingerprints on its hands. And with the spell at its end, the Unity creature floated up with its hands outstretched, its skin slowly growing brighter and brighter before it became blinding. Then, an explosion. Prismatic shards flew outwards before dispersing into motes of mana that became part of the environment once again, its job already finished. And once the light subsided, the Unity creature showed its true form. Underneath that prismatic skin was something entirely human. Michael floated up, staring at this new creature that he just created. It stared back at him, its eyes filled with curiosity. He had created a Unity creature in the form of himself. With its golden hair, its sharp good looks, this was a perfect copy. The only difference was that this one was made out of pure Unity. Its very body was made out of the most destructive power in the world. He raised his hand, and his copy raised its hand as well. From now on, he would be calling this as his Unity clone. Unity clone. This spell creates a perfect clone of the user made out of pure Unity. The user can control them as if it was their own body, as well as swap places with it at any time. Since it was made out of Unity, no magic nor ability power can stop this swap. Michael stared at his Unity clone with satisfaction. This new clone of his was extremely different from his shadow clones. One aspect was its strength. He saw firsthand how strong a Unity creature could be. Its speed was almost as instantaneous as a Unity gun, and its strength was as destructive as Unity itself. He could see this Unity clone going toe-to-toe against Magnetics themselves. Its natural Unity body would be able to defend against most ability powers, rendering them useless. And according to ChatJK5, he could also swap places with his Unity clone at any time. Back when he was trapped in Kuno's underground castle, he couldn't leave because he couldn't contact his shadow clones. The very walls of that place was laced with ability power, allowing no communication between him and the mana on the outside world. But now things were different. This clone was made out of Unity, the only power that could fight against ability powers. If he were trapped in the same situation again, then he'd be able to escape easily if he had planted his Unity clone somewhere outside. This is very useful. Just then, he heard the satisfying clinking sound coming from the obelisk. The first lock that had been fractured was now a whole piece, with its curving metal lock now twisted backwards. It was unlocked. This was a cause for celebration. Not only did Michael pass the test, but he was also able to steal a very powerful Unity clone from the obelisk. However, this didn't last long as he suddenly saw the next lock on the obelisk start pulsating with light. Michael's guesses came true. He had only passed the first test. There were 2 more to go. This test is brutal, he remarked. He didn't think anyone other than him would have passed against the Unity creature. But I guess that's why the bone says that only the worthy can get its inheritance. And just as he was thinking that, the beam of light on the obelisk suddenly got brighter and brighter as the timer on the lock reached its end. A figure burst forth from the light, its entire body basking in prismatic energy, before it crashed in front of the obelisk like a meteor. Michael stared at this new test from the obelisk and couldn't help but furrow his brows. After all, this figure was another Unity creature. It looked exactly the same as the one from before, with seemingly no difference whatsoever. Its entire body was clad in a prismatic light, standing on 2 feet and had 2 arms on its side. Even its head was faceless, giving Michael no indication as to what emotion this creature was feeling right now. It stared at him and Michael stared at him back. Michael raised his hand, his index finger glowing prismatic as he shot a Unity gun towards the new Unity creature. As the beam shot towards the Unity creature, it casually raised its hand and swatted the shot downwards, scorching nothing but the ground. Even though this Unity creature looked exactly the same as the last one, Michael felt even more danger facing this creature. He didn't know why, but it emanated a kind of strength that the Unity creature from before didn't. And suddenly, it moved. It disappeared from his sight, reappearing in front of him with its arms raised above its head. Michael felt a sense of déjà vu. This was the same attack that the Unity creature performed before. Having learned his lesson, he didn't attempt to defend himself with his prismatic shield. He simply swapped places with his Unity clone. His body began to be clad in a prismatic light as his body suddenly shifted with just the tiniest bit of vibration. And suddenly, the Unity creature was now facing a version of Michael who looked completely identical to himself, except for the blank expression on its face. The Unity creature brought down its hands towards Michael's clone, its hands clashing with the clone's defensive hands. Prismatic lights sparked upon contact, showing what would happen when 2 equal beings fought against each other. But just then, 2 beams of Unity shot from 2 different places at the same time, targeting the Unity creature's head. Michael and his drone fired off a Unity gun towards the Unity creature, who reacted by raising its hands on the side of its head. The two beams hit the creature's forearms before ricocheting outwards, unharmed. But with its hands defending its head, this left its body completely vulnerable. Michael's clone pushed its finger towards the Unity creature's chest, with a prismatic light emanating off from its hands. Then, the beam shot off, hitting the Unity creature point-blank, the beam leaving out from its back. The Unity creature stumbled backwards, smoke still coming from the entry and exit wounds in its chest. It walked backwards before a stone caused it to trip, causing it to land on its behind. Michael swapped places with his clone again and slowly approached the Unity creature. He looked at the Unity creature and extended his hand forward, commanding the mana in the air to come towards him. With the Unity creature on its last legs, he hoped to use its body as a frame to create another Unity clone. With his Unity saber in hand, a single swing towards its head would finish the job. He gripped the switch in his hands and decisively swung it with force, decapitating the Unity creature. Its head fell lifelessly on the floor, rolling forwards until it suddenly exploded into pure motes of light that joined the mana in the surroundings. Its body turned lifeless, mana slowly melting off of its body. Michael raised his hands, ready to control the mana in his surroundings and create another Unity creature in his image. And just as he was about to do so, he caught a glimpse of the gunshot wound on its chest. He saw a glint. That wasn't supposed to be there. Michael stared at the Unity creature's chest and saw something he would have never thought was possible. Armed with curiosity, he held out his hands and focused on that glistening object buried underneath the melting body of the Unity creature. Its chest started to vibrate before a single metallic drop of liquid slowly floated towards Michael, its speed getting faster the closer it got to him. And as it made contact with the natural mana in the air, the drop of liquid began to emanate a pure white fire, something that would destroy anything it touched. There was no mistaking it. This was a Godforge piece. And as he beckoned, more and more drops of Godforge pieces continued to float towards him. Its attraction to someone of his nature would not let anything hinder its journey. He couldn't believe it. This Unity creature had a Godforge piece in its chest. He didn't even think it was possible. These were two directly opposing powers that should have no overlap with each other. The very definition of an ability power was that it could alter the reality of the world and even render mana useless. At least that's what he always thought. But now, he was seeing first-hand evidence of the two powers working together to form whatever this creature was. The creator of this obelisk was someone from the ancient era. Does that mean that back in those days mana and ability powers were intertwined together? The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Why was he a natural magnetic, someone who commanded control over the Godforge pieces from their natural attraction towards him? It was because he could wield all 8 mana, and therefore had the power to use Unity. And as he observed the Godforge pieces floating in the air and shooting towards his chest, he suddenly realized something. That white fire that surrounded the liquid, that was Unity. He slapped his own forehead for only now being cognizant of that fact. He used to just simply accept it without asking any questions why it was surrounded by Unity. Unity and ability powers were intricately linked to each other. That was a fact. As for how, he still didn't know the answer to that question. Not only that, but there was one more important question that remained. If it had these Godforge pieces, then was it possible that this creature was a magnetic? He suddenly remembered that feeling he got as he laid eyes on this dying creature. He sensed a different power, which he now understood to be the Godforge pieces in its heart. But it still didn't make sense. If it was a magnetic, then why didn't it use any of its abilities to defend itself? It died without exhibiting any signs of an awakening whatsoever. He was consumed by curiosity. He wanted to know if this Unity creature had the power to wield those Godforge pieces like a human, or was it simply just a container? It could very well be a deliberate design from the creator of this obelisk as a reward to whoever defeated the Unity creature. But no matter how much he speculated, he would now never know the answer. As the last bit of Godforge pieces left the Unity creature's body, Most of its unity had already melted away and dispersed into the air. There was nothing left for him to study. If he waited any longer, then the unity creature would fully dissolve into its most basic elements. At the very last second, he raised his hand, mana gathering at his palms, before commanding them to surround the dead body of the unity creature. Motes of light clumped together as the injuries on the creature's body started to mend. Even its decapitated head was slowly growing back from its stump. It wasn't long before a new body had formed. Michael now had 2 unity clones by his side. But despite this useful acquisition, he couldn't bring himself to celebrate. ChatJK5, please tell me you were able to figure out how the unity creature was able to put a Godforge piece in its heart. Unfortunately not, Michael. I was not able to observe how its body worked since it had already died instantly after you decapitated its head. Pouring salt in the wound. Yeah, I get it, I made a mistake. It's not your fault, Michael. Even if I was able to see how those Godforge pieces were placed, I would have no idea how they would work in a Unity body system. Michael regretted killing the Unity creature so easily. He wished that it had put up more of a fight so that it could have had the chance to use its ability power, if it even had any. Come on. Please tell me that there's another Unity creature that I have to defeat, he begged the obelisk. Just then, a very unsatisfying ding resounded out from the obelisk as the second lock lit up the same way as the first one. Then it cracked, signaling its completion. He completed the second test of the obelisk. Damn it, he cursed. This was perhaps the only time in his life where he was asking for more of a challenge. The obelisk's designer probably didn't expect its challenger to have a mithril relic drone and the ability to copy a Unity creature. The fight got extremely one-sided. How many kilos did I get from the Unity creature? Only 1 kilo, ChatJK5 answered despondently. The Unity creature was only in the first stage of the body formation realm, which was very weak compared to his 7th stage cultivation. I just hope that the third and last test of the obelisk gives me the same test but a lot more challenging. Just as he said that to himself, the obelisk suddenly glowed a red light that reached the high black skies above. It emanated a kind of danger that manifested as an invisible shockwave that coursed through the entire island, as if answering Michael's challenge. Michael readied himself as 3 figures clad in unity shot out from the obelisk's red beam of light, landing on the ground with a thud. His eyes widened with happiness as he saw his opponents have that same prismatic glitter surrounding their body. They were Unity creatures, and as a greeting to his new test subjects, he raised his hand and fired a single shot of Unity gun. The Unity creature at the center of their formation raised its hand and punched the beam at the perfect time, sending the shot back towards its sender. Michael swung his Unity saber, prismatic sparks flying off as it met the shot. However, his hand started to tremble as he tried to parry it back. The power embedded into this shot was a lot more powerful than his original one. His guard was broken as he had to deflect the shot into the ground. These 3 new Unity creatures were a lot stronger than before, that was for sure. But he didn't despair. Instead, he thought of this as a wonderful opportunity. He was going to find out their secret no matter what. 2 Unity creatures suddenly disappeared from Michael's sight, only to reappear right in front of him with their arms raised above their heads. But just then, Michael's Unity clones intercepted them, blocking their attacks before countering with a swift kick in the chest. The 2 Unity creatures flew backwards, their feet skidding in the ground before they stopped. Michael was wise to their moves. He had already fought these Unity creatures 2 times already, and their starting moves never changed. It was always a slam with both their hands, which was easy to counter once he knew what to expect. After that, he commanded his Unity clones to pursue their targets. Both clones disappeared, only to reappear behind the Unity creatures. The tips of their index fingers were glowing as they fired off a shot of Unity gun. The creatures raised their hands and reflected the shots before shooting off towards the clones. And in the distance, they began to clash in hand-to-hand combat, sparks flying off as Unity fought against Unity. They were all evenly matched, which was exactly what Michael wanted. Now, he was left alone with 1 Unity creature, which made it that much easier to plan for his experiments. But first, he used his drone vision to look at the Unity creatures. He wanted to see if this one had Godforge pieces in its chest as well. Unfortunately, the fact that the creature was made entirely out of Unity made this extremely hard to perceive. Its entire body was glowing prismatic, which made it hard to see if its chest was glowing red-hot orange. He piloted the drone to move forwards to take a closer look, but this seemed to have incited the creature to attack. It lunged towards the flying drone, trying to grab it with both hands. Although the drone was already damaged from the previous tests, Michael decided to let it get captured for just a single brief instant. The Unity creature grasped at the drone's frame, pushing on it with both hands trying to crush it. And in that moment, Michael finally got a close look at the creature's chest. There, buried in the blinding light of Unity, he saw a tiny sliver of orange glow in its heart. It had Godforge pieces. Once he confirmed this fact, he immediately commanded the drone to shrink itself, its size becoming as small as a bird. And using this chance, the drone flew off of the Unity creature's grasp and returned to Michael's side. It was able to escape before any real damage was done to the drone. This Unity creature has Godforge pieces. I assume the other two have one as well. Now, how am I going to make it use its ability power? The only way he could think of was to fight it normally, which was quite easy to do. The Unity creature disappeared from his sight, only to reappear at his side, its fingers glowing with power as it tried to shoot a Unity gun at point blank on the side of his chest. Its speed was comparable to that of a Unity beam itself. Michael had no chance of dodging. But thanks to his previous dealings with the creature, he didn't have to. He was already familiar with all of its moves. He twisted his body aside, elbowing the Unity gun pointed at his torso before swinging his Unity saber at its arm. The Unity creature then used its other hand to grab the hand wielding the Unity saber. Michael's skin immediately started to burn from contact with Unity. But just then, a beam of Unity shot at the creature's chest, making it recoil backwards. It looked up with its faceless head towards the drone that injured it. It then raised its hand, intending to catch it once again. But Michael lunged his Unity saber forward while it was distracted. The creature was caught off guard, with the Unity saber hitting its shoulder before it was able to brush it aside with its hand. It tried to counterattack by taking advantage of Michael's overextended hand, but just as it was about to lunge, a beam of Unity shot at its hand, completely shattering it into pure motes of light. The Unity creature recoiled in pain, but Michael didn't give it any chance and swung his Unity saber, severing its other hand. He didn't need the hands in order to study the creature. With a well-coordinated attack with his drone, dealing with this Unity creature became extremely easy. If the fight continued on like this, it would only be a matter of time until Michael ultimately killed it off just like the last time. But he didn't want to, yet. He still needed to find out why it had a Godforge piece in its chest. Was it purely for reward purposes? Even at an extreme disadvantage, the Unity creature still wasn't using its ability power. If it had one, then it should have used it by now. And as he was contemplating this question, it suddenly dawned on him. All this time, the Unity creature had been using the Unity gun and the perfect parry like with his Unity saber. Those were his techniques. It was only when he used them against the creature that it finally started using them against him. The Unity creature is learning from me, he realized. Going by that logic, this meant that they would only awaken their ability power once they copied it from him. He reached down in his pockets and retrieved a single switch. He was about to throw it towards the injured Unity creature when he stopped himself in time. If my guess is correct, then this means that all the Unity creatures would awaken their ability powers once I showed mine. That was not ideal. Once he unleashed this power, it could very well turn the tides towards the Unity creature's side. ChatJK5 do you need? I only need one intact specimen to study, ChatJK5 answered instantly. Say no more, he said as he swung his Unity saber and decapitated the Unity creature instantly. Immediately, drops of Godforge pieces flowed towards him and joined the rest in his heart. And without even looking back, he commanded the mana in the air to reform the dead Unity creature behind him. A few seconds later, a new clone emerged following close behind him. Then, he turned his attention towards the other two Unity creatures fighting his clones. The Unity creatures were winning by a slight margin, but his clones were keeping them at bay. He picked his target and walked towards it. Just as the Unity creature was about to punch his clone, he raised his hand and fired off a shot of Unity gun, hitting its shoulder and breaking its stance. His clone immediately lunged forwards and brought down both its hands towards the creature's head, bashing it downwards. Crashed onto the ground, right in front of Michael's feet, and without a moment's hesitation, he stabbed his Unity saber in its head, killing it instantly. Godforge pieces floated up towards his body, while mana began to reform the creature into another clone. And finally, there was one of them left. Michael stared at the Unity creature, its posture one of fear and anxiousness. It looked around itself and realized that it was the only one left of its kind. The others turned into a clone that were now looking towards it with the intention to do the same thing that had been done to them. It raised its hand, its index finger glowing with the power of Unity, as it aimed it at Michael's clone in the hopes of creating some separation. But just as the prismatic beam was about to unleash its power, a single iron block tumbled through the air and landed directly on its chest. The Unity creature turned towards Michael, seeing the visage of a futuristic, mechanical figure that was missing its head and its lower body. Despite that, its golden armor made out of nanoparticles shone with an oppressive power. For a second, the Unity creature stood there, its faceless head staring at Harbinger. It tilted its head slightly, seemingly noticing something within the diva. But just then, the switch now lodged in its chest finally took effect. An invisible cocoon of weaved ability power threads emanating from Michael's chest enveloped its entire body. As the time-stop effect of the switch was about to hold the creature's momentum into a complete freeze, its Unity-filled body suddenly burst out into a white fire, completely burning the cocoon it had been encased in. And as the threads of ability power burned in the air, some of its fibers were suddenly sucked into the creature's chest. Michael's eyes widened as he saw this. It's happening. He immediately flew his drone closer, hoping he could observe the process in which the Unity creature awakened its ability power. With his drone vision, he saw his own thread of ability power land on the Godforge pieces in the creature's chest. Then, it suddenly started to glow red-hot as it began to churn, ability power starting to empower the creature. Michael stood there and watched as a familiar image started to form above the Unity creature's head. The golden aura that surrounded it, the sleek metallic finish on the armor, the pulsating lights, the holographic projections. There was no mistaking it. This was Harbinger. SK. The least it could have done was copy my awesome aura. Harbinger complained. That's you, he said to Harbinger as he looked at the diva above the creature. Copied you. Look closely. It's just a projection of me. A mere image of an image. It's like seeing me in the reflection of a mirror in the reflection of a puddle. After the initial shock, Michael was able to observe the diva with much better clarity. And just like Harbinger said, although the image above the creature copied every single feature in Harbinger's body, it failed to reproduce that intangible aura that surrounded the diva. It felt two-dimensional. But still, it's amazing that it could copy a diva like this. Then, a new question arose in his mind. Can it copy my ability too? He didn't have to wait long as the Unity creature raised its hand, beckoning something in the ground to rise up. The soil underneath their feet started to shake, small rocks levitating off the ground. Then, a single chunk of pure iron ore suddenly emerged from underneath, causing bits and pieces of rock and soil to explode outwards. With this chunk of iron ore floating in front of it, the Unity creature closed its hands as if crushing something in his palms. The iron ore started folding upon itself, as if an invisible blacksmith was hammering upon it with a million strikes. It wasn't long before the iron turned into a familiar shape, a switch. Michael was extremely fascinated with what he saw. It was a perfect replication of his ability power. However, its power was very weak compared to his incomparable to the real thing. It was probably because of two things. First, just like Harbinger said, this Unity creature couldn't perfectly replicate everything about a diva, which makes its ability power a little bit diminished from the real thing. Secondly, its cultivation was only equal to that of a second-stage body formation magnetic. Still, that's my switch. Could these Unity creatures copy any ability power that it comes across? Just as he was having that thought, the Unity creature punched out its hands, causing this switch to shoot towards the drone. It landed perfectly on its frame, and immediately, a thread of ability power unspooled out of the creature's God-forged pieces and began to create a cocoon around the drone. As soon as the last thread was weaved, the drone suddenly froze in place as if it was hovering in the air. Yet, its propellers were static, unmoving. "Amazing!" Michael praised, before snapping his fingers. A satisfying click resounded out of the drone's frame as a much bigger spool of ability power thread shot out of Michael's chest and wrapped around the cocoon on the drone, creating another cocoon. Suddenly, the drone's propellers started revving up as it regained all of its momentum. Michael always had a switch stored in his drone. All he had to do to counteract the Unity creature's switch was to pause its own pause, negating its effects completely. This was basically a battle between a second stage and a seventh stage magnetic. Unless they were Michael, the results would be obvious. The drone flew up, prismatic light gathering at the barrels underneath its frame before shooting at the Unity creature in its chest. The aftershock of its own ability power getting destroyed left it vulnerable for a moment, which the drone perfectly took advantage of. The shot landed on its chest, creating a shallow hole that exposed the metallic object buried in its body. Michael was now looking at the Godforged pieces in the creature's body, the metal still pumping ability power in the creature's body. ChatJK5, I'm tired of this Unity creature always copying my moves. It's time we do the same. Understood, Michael. Analyzing the Unity creature's Godforged pieces. His trusty AI assistant began observing the creature's innards, trying to see how the God-forged pieces worked in tandem with the Unity that surrounded it. Just then, the creature suddenly jumped backwards, fear written all over its faceless head. "Just sit still," Michael said as he gestured with his head for his clones to follow. All 4 clones disappeared, only to appear surrounding the Unity creature from all sides. And with swift, coordinated movement, they lunged forwards and each grabbed a limb from the Unity creature. It struggled under their hands, but was unable to escape. It tried to fire off a Unity gun from its fingers, but Michael's clones simply pointed the gun away from their bodies, the prismatic beam shooting off into the darkness void surrounding the island. Then, Michael approached the Unity creature, and with an apathetic voice asked ChatJK5, "Okay, what do you need?" "I need to see." ChatJK5 began giving him a list of experiments for him to do to the Unity creature, and he complied without any question. If anyone were to see this, they would immediately feel sorry for the Unity creature. Analyzation complete. Magic theory acquired. Michael couldn't hide his excitement as ChatJK5 said those words he'd been waiting for. Suddenly, a wave of information washed over his brain as ChatJK5 gave him the magic theory behind the Unity creature's creation. In an instant, he knew all the technical movements and magic placement he needed to do in order to implement Godforged pieces in his clones. Placing those destructive metals inside an equally destructive container using an intricate use of the 8 elements became second nature to him. It all looked simple. He looked down at the corpse of the Unity creature. He killed it after completing all of the experiments ChatJK5 needed. Its body was now slowly melting as the Unity in its body began to disperse. Usually, he would first absorb the Godforged pieces in its body before turning it into a clone. But this time, he left it alone. He raised his hand, all 8 mana gathering at his palms as a clump of prismatically colored motes of light. Once there was enough mana, he gently pushed it towards the Unity creature's chest, mending the hole in its chest. As he did, he implanted a white magic circle containing the magic theory ChatJK5 gave to him. Immediately, the mana clump disassembled into individual motes of light. It dispersed, covering the Unity creature's body according to the instructions left behind by the magic circle. The Unity creature's body slowly lifted upright, its body levitating off the ground by a few inches. Colorful lights rotated around the creature, slowly getting faster and faster until it created a prismatic sphere that obscured its entire body. And as the spell reached its end, the sphere exploded, motes of light returning back into the environment. What was left was no longer a creature, but a man. It was a perfect clone of Michael, just like the 4 other clones beside him. Except, this one had an indescribable aura around itself. And with his drone vision, the reason became obvious. Its chest was now glowing orange, making it look like an ordinary magnetic cultivator. "It's a success," he rejoiced. And without missing a beat, he turned towards his other clones and controlled them to come closer. Right now, he had an extra 7 kilos of Godforge pieces. 6 from the clones he just defeated, and 1 from the previous test. He put his hands on his chest and pulled it forward. Slowly drops of a metallic liquid began to exit out of his chest, immediately becoming endowed with a white flame upon contact with the outside air. As it floated in front of him, he spread out his hands, causing these drops of Godforge pieces to separate into different paths and eventually landing onto his Unity clones. As soon as these drops entered the clone's chest, a white magic circle appeared underneath their feet as Michael's magic began to change their very structure, allowing space in their artificial hearts for a Godforge piece. Their chests glowed golden for a brief second, before dimming. They were now officially magnetic Unity clones. He decided to return the Godforge pieces he obtained from the creatures, turning the other 2 clones into a second-stage body formation magnetic, and the other a first stage. Now, he had 3 clones in the second stage and 1 in the first stage. But since he lacked more, his very first clone remained without a Godforge piece. "I'm going to keep this normal clone as a failsafe," he decided. "It's reassuring to know that I can teleport to safety whenever I want." As for the other 4 clones, he had still yet to decide what he wanted to do with them. If he got an excess of Godforge pieces, he would certainly give it to them. But for now, his priority was the Dragonborns, so he would give them the Godforge pieces if he had it. But of course, in order to have a failsafe, he needed to get out of this place first. Just as he was thinking that, a satisfying ding resounded from the obelisk as the final lock finally shattered. "I finally completed the tests." The designer for this obelisk probably never thought their tests would get completed so easily. They were supposed to get harder after each completed lock, but it turned out to be the complete opposite. Michael had the hardest time facing the first Unity creature, suffering grievous wounds multiple times. But after learning how to create a Unity creature himself, things became exponentially easier. Just then, the beam of light on the obelisk emitted an incredibly bright flash that encompassed everything, blinding Michael completely. He had to close his eyes, but kept his clones close to him for protection. A few seconds later, the blinding light subsided. As he opened his eyes, he saw the obelisk still standing proudly in front of him. The ability power threads that were sewed to create the locks had disappeared completely. Now, there was nothing inscribed onto the obelisk. Instead, there were these cracks that propagated all around its surface, as if it was on the verge of ruin. The golden streaks that were around it had disappeared, leaving large creases on its surface that caused instability within the obelisk at a critical point. The whole island started to shake, with bits and debris starting to fall off of the obelisk. Michael stood back far enough for safety, but close enough to observe. The quaking intensified as each piece that fell onto the ground further exacerbated the shaking in the island. Dust burst out from the ground, obscuring the structure as it completely crumbled onto the ground. Then silence. It was only a few seconds later when the dust finally subsided that Michael could finally see the end result of the obelisk's destruction. Scattered all around were large debris of obsidian-like stone. But underneath all of this rubble, he could see a faint white glow that beckoned him to come closer. It was a power that was familiar yet strange at the same time. He started walking towards it. Instinctually, he knew that whatever this was not dangerous. He didn't know how he knew that, but the power that emanated from it didn't emanate any kind of hostility. It was a different kind of power. If Michael could describe it, then he would say that it was like the difference between a fighter and a scholar. A fighter was powerful because of his strength, while a scholar was powerful because of their intellect. and he felt that the object underneath all of this rubble was like that of a scholar. It was powerful, yet weak. As he scaled the debris, the white glow got brighter, as if sensing the approach of someone it considered worthy. Then finally, peeking out from the debris, he saw it. It was a cube, floating on its pointed edge, slowly rotating and giving off that white glow. Michael then observed it with his drone vision, trying to see if it was clad in ability power. And as he entered his vision, a blinding light pierced through the screen and physically reached out into his eyes. If he didn't exit out of his drone vision in time, his eyes would have been burned. "Ah!" Michael groaned, massaging his eyes. "What the hell was that?" That thing's designed so that no one can look at it," Harbinger said. "Not even those above the nascent spirit realm can pry its secrets unharmed." Michael was surprised to hear such a description from Harbinger. It seemed that the secrets hidden within this strange cube were incredibly profound, something that wasn't meant for the eyes of mortals and magnetics alike. He was incredibly lucky that all he got was sore eyes after inadvertently trying to figure out the secret to the universe. "What even is this, and why is it so secretive?" Harbinger shrugged. "No idea. ChatJK5. Any ideas?" "You don't need to ask her. If I don't know anything, then she certainly won't." ChatJK5 went silent, which was atypical given how much she hated Harbinger. "See? She doesn't know anything. TSK. You cannot be more mistaken, idiot robot." ChatJK5 responded. "Michael, I was able to ascertain a certain hidden coded message within the cube." Harbinger's insults prompted ChatJK5 to step up her game. "Ho? You're calling me that, you buy?" Michael immediately muted Harbinger. "What kind of message?" Suddenly, a new window appeared in his vision, showing the subtle details in his surroundings. All around the floating cube were the debris and chunks from the crumbled obelisk. Upon first glance, the way these chunks shattered and created debris looked typical of the way that a normal stone structure would collapse. Some turned into powder, most into slabs and blocks. But then Michael remembered. This place had no gravity. There were already collapsed structures floating in the dark skies even before he got here. So, if the obelisk were to truly crumble in this zero-G environment, then it should have spread apart in all directions. It shouldn't have fallen apart in the ground. There was only one explanation for this. The placement for these debris was deliberate. No normal person would be able to decipher this puzzle so easily. But as expected, ChatJK5's incredible processing power was able to take in all of these details into her database and churn out all the hidden patterns that its designer left for them. Suddenly, those points of interest lit up in his vision, before a line was drawn from their positions towards the floating cube and intersecting in the middle. And now a new pattern emerged from those lines. Michael's eyes widened. In front of him, he saw a brain, with the points of interest becoming the neurons that made up the entire system in a human mind. A brain. It seems that this cube is some sort of central processing unit for a magical system. That was the only logical explanation that he and ChatJK5 could come up with. It explained that feeling of deep knowledge it had when he observed the cube for the first time. Why would they put this here? Clearly, this entire thing with the obelisk had been an arduous test to see if he was worthy or not. And once he showed his worthiness, it should have given him a great reward for all of his troubles. This didn't seem like a reward. He didn't even know what to do with this. Curious, he allowed one of his Unity clones to approach the cube. He deployed the only clone who didn't have a Godforge piece in its heart so that they wouldn't be wasted if something bad happened. The Unity clone walked forward with no hesitation and bent down to touch the cube. As soon as it did, the cube lit up in a golden light, spinning 2 times faster than it did before. But a few seconds later, the golden light subsided and its rotation returned to a normal pace. After that, nothing happened. Michael waited for a few more minutes to be sure, but as far as he could tell, nothing happened to the cube nor his clone. However, something must have happened or else the cube wouldn't have reacted that way. He just didn't know what. It was very hard to be perceptive when he couldn't use his drone vision. So, he had to rely on his own senses to decipher this new puzzle. Next, he tried to have one of his magnetic Unity clones approach the cube. And just like before, as soon as the clone touched the cube, a golden light emanated from its core and spun 100 times per second, subsiding only a few seconds later. So there's no difference between a magnetic and a non-magnetic clone. They both elicited the same reaction. After a few more experiments, he found out that each clone could only induce a reaction from the clone once. Multiple touches had no results. I guess it's time for me to touch it myself. Just like last time, the obelisk only started its test once he personally made contact with its surface. Maybe this was the same. I wouldn't mind new tests, honestly, as long as I get more clones at the end of it. With the white cube right in front of him, he couldn't help but squint his eyes. He knew his eyes would only get burned if he looked at it through his drone's vision, but he didn't want to take that chance. His hands slowly approached the cube, his hands gingerly making contact with the edges of the cube. The strange floating object stopped rotating, his grasp halting its momentum. But it didn't light up. As soon as he let go, the cube continued to rotate as it did before. Why is it not reacting? It didn't make sense why his clones elicited a response from the cube while he didn't. He thought this was an inheritance meant for him since he was the one who defeated the test. Yet, the cube basically rejected him. Is it because the clones are a spell? Does this cube only react to magic? Normally, throwing magic into an ancient powerful object was nothing less than suicide. But in this occasion, he was willing to try it. He started with a simple fireball spell and let it gently graze past the cube's edges. Nothing happened. He tested the other elements, and none of them elicited a reaction as well. It was a fruitless endeavor, but at least now, he knew that the cube wouldn't explode even if it had magic thrown directly towards it. Is it Unity? He raised his hand, finger emitting a prismatic light as he shot the Unity gun towards the cube's center. The Unity beam ricocheted off of its edges and into the ground, burning a deep hole. It didn't work. The cube didn't light up even once. Even his Unity saber elicited no reaction. So it's only my clones? No matter how he looked at it, none of this made any sense. He was starting to get annoyed. He spent more time trying to elicit a reaction from the cube than finishing the obelisk's test itself. He had half a mind to simply take the cube into his pockets and leave this place now, trying to procrastinate solving this puzzle. But just as he was at his wit's end, ChatJK5 suddenly had an idea. Michael, may I make contact with the cube?